And
Happy.
Whenever you're ready, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I'd like to call this meeting to order, the Lyon County Board of County Commissioners. This is August 18th, 2022. This meeting tonight is a waste franchise workshop. Action will be taken on all items unless otherwise noted. No action will be taken on any item until it's properly agendized. To avoid meeting disruption, please place your cell phones and your outdated beepers in the silent mode or turn them off during the meeting. The board reserves the right to take items in a different order to accomplish business in the most efficient manner. Items may be combined for consideration and items may be pulled or removed from the agenda at any time. Restrictions on comments by the general public. All right, who's in trouble?
That's $1.
Russ. Any such restrictions must be reasonable and may restrict the time, place, and manner of the comments, but may not restrict comments based upon viewpoint. Board of Commissioners convening as other boards. Members of the Board of County Commissioners also serve as the liquor board, such as Lyon Vector Control District Board, Mason Valley Mosquito Abatement District Board, Walker River Weed Control District Board, Willow Creek General Improvement District Board, the Silver Springs General Improvement District Board, and during this meeting may convene as any of those boards as indicated on this or a separately posted agenda. Item number 1, roll call. Please note that all 5 commissioners are here in our alternate chambers. We do not have it on here, but if I could get everybody to please indulge me and stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Let's cut us off. Okay. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. Please be seated. Okay, at this time, we're going to turn to public participation. No action will be taken on any item until it's properly agendized. It is anticipated that public participation will be held at this time, though it may be returned to at any time during the agenda. Citizens wishing to speak during public participation are asked to state their name for the record and will be limited to 3 minutes. The board will conduct public comment after discussion of each agenda action item, but before the board takes any action. So does anybody have any public participation that is not on this agenda? Seeing none there. Do we have anybody on Zoom?
No, I don't see anybody.
We're good. Okay.
Madam Chair, since there's no spot for commissioners' comments, so real quick, I'll do our public participation. Really dismayed with all the feedback that we got after the last go around. That there's not, I mean, we've got more people, I think, representing potential bidders than we do community. So.
A lot of the feedback's already people gave out.
So number 3, for possible action, workshop and presentation on a request for proposal process to discuss the solid waste franchise to receive community input and to provide staff with direction to develop a request for proposals for solid waste franchise, which will include the services to be provided, mandated, or eliminated as part of the franchise. Mr. Haskin.
All right.
I'll go ahead and start first, Madam Chair.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Page.
Jeff Page, County Manager for the record. So a couple housekeeping things for those of you who have not been to a public meeting before. The chair will call for public participation when we get to a point that makes sense. We need you to identify yourself with tell us your name, and then you will have 3 minutes to talk. Since we don't have a lectern or podium, you can do it from your chair, but we need you to stand up and speak loud so we can pick it up on the Zoom for recording purposes. Moving forward there. We are here tonight at the request of the board after the last process we went through with trying to award a franchise for waste or solid waste disposal and transportation. Based upon a number of conversations the board has, I had directed Andrew and his staff to work in cooperation with and coordination with the district attorney's office to not only identify components of the franchise, but also for the board's edification and the community's understanding what that process looks like once it goes out to RFP, what the RFP process looks like, what the screening of the RFP process looks like when the bids come in, and then what comes to the board and the board's ultimate decision and how they get there. So with that, I'll turn over to Mr. Haskin to begin his presentation.
Thank you. Close this door. That'll go off the whole time. Good evening, Andrew Haskin, Lyon County Community Development Director for the record. I've got a somewhat brief presentation tonight, kind of in two parts. One, I'm gonna talk about a little bit about what a franchise is. This is something that, or I'm not a franchise, but a request for proposal is. I didn't really go into that in too much detail the last time we went through this process. So I wanted to make sure that I put together some slides and, spelled out some of the NRS that we have to follow through this process. The second part is just a couple of suggestions that staff has, and after that, then really looking to hear from the board on what do you want to see in the request for proposal as we move forward, so that we can get it drafted back to you for review. So with that, I will start off, jump right into it. So what is a request for proposal? Request for proposal, or RFP, is a document that announces a project, describes it, and solicits bids from qualified contractors to complete it. When using an RFP, the entity requesting the bids is responsible for evaluating the feasibility of the bids submitted, the financial health of the bidding companies, and each bidder's ability to undertake the project. In Nevada, the RFP process, as it relates to state and local purchasing, is a legal process, which is outlined in NRS. So I threw in some definitions from NRS, and I realize that's probably a little bit hard to read, but I will kind of go through it. These are redundant, and I did that intentionally because I wanted to point out that the terms are used interchangeably. NRS 333 02004 defines invitation to bid, meaning it means a written statement which sets forth the requirements and specifications of a contract to be awarded by competitive selection. You'll notice that the definition underneath request for proposals is exactly the same. The wording is the same. And then I do want to point out that NRS 333 is actually state purchasing, but that's where they have the definitions. NRS 332 is local purchasing, local governments. And it provides this. It says, as used in this chapter, unless the context otherwise requires. Solicitation means a written statement which sets forth the requirements and specifications of a contract to be awarded by. An invitation to bid, request for proposal, request for a statement of qualifications, a request for a quotation, or any other accepted method of purchasing that complies with the provisions of this chapter. So I just want to make sure, as I use those three different terms, and you'll see them, in other pieces of NRS tonight that essentially mean the same thing. So NRS 332.065 says the contracts for which estimated annual amount required to perform is more than $100,000. Advertisement required, permissive solicitation, award, prohibition on entering without certification relating to certain boycotts of Israel. I'll explain that in a minute. But it says one, except as otherwise provided by specific state statute, if the estimated annual amount required to perform a contract is more than $100,000, the governing body or its authorized representative shall advertise the contract in the manner prescribed in NRS 332.045 and may issue a solicitation for the contract. And then it goes into it a bit further. It says if the estimated annual amount to perform a contract is more than $100,000 and the method for obtaining the contract that designated in the solicitation is an invitation to bid, the governing body or its authorized representatives must accept as otherwise provided by, except as otherwise provided by specific statute, award the contract to the lowest responsive and responsible bidder. And then it goes into what that means. The lowest responsive and responsible bidder may be judged on the basis of price, conformance to specifications, qualifications of the bidder, including without limitation, the possession of or limit on any required license of the bidder, the financial responsibility of the bidder, the experience of the bidder, and the ability of the bidder to perform the contract. D, this is continued, the adequacy of the equipment of the bidder, past performance, performance schedule or delivery date. G and H don't really apply, but I'll read them. It says if the contract requires the delivery of goods, the total cost of ownership of the goods. If the contract requires delivery of goods, the purpose for which the goods to be supplied are required. I, the best interest of the public, and J, such other criteria as may be set forth by the governing body or its authorized representative in the advertisement or solicitation as applicable that pertains to the contract. So those are, this is why we go through the RFP process for these such type contracts. And it spells out what we can and cannot consider. NRS 332.043 solicitation required contents. Each solicitation must include, without limitation, the minimum requirements that a successful responding offerer must meet for the awarding of the contract pursuant to the provisions of this chapter. The method by which the contract will be awarded, including without limitation on the basis of price or lowest responsive and responsible bidder. 3, notice of the written certification required pursuant to subsection 4 of NRS 332.065, if applicable, and for the period during which a notice of protest regarding the awarding of a contract pursuant to NRS 332.068 may be submitted, if applicable. I want to cover a little bit about proprietary information because this is relevant to some of the discussion that was had at the last in the last go around. NRS 332.025.7 defines proprietary information as any trade secret or confidential business information that is contained in a response submitted to a governing body or its authorized representative on a particular contract, or any other trade secret or confidential business information submitted to a governing body or its authorized representative by a responding offerer and designated as proprietary by the governing body or its authorized representative. It says, as used in this subsection, confidential business information means any information related to the amount or source of any income, profits, losses, or expenditures of a person, including data related to cost, price, or the customers of a responding offerer, which is submitted in support of a response. The term does not include the amount of a response submitted to a governing body or its authorized representative. So NRS 332.061 puts a limitation on the disclosure of proprietary information and of solicitation containing provisions requiring negotiation or evaluation. It's kind of an important section of NRS as it relates to receiving bids for an RFP and how they're evaluated. And it says, except as otherwise provided in this subsection and NRS 239.0115, proprietary information does not constitute public information and is confidential. A person shall not disclose proprietary information unless the disclosure is made for the purpose of a civil, administrative, or criminal investigation or proceeding. And the person receiving the information represents in writing that protections exist under applicable law to preserve the integrity, confidentiality, and security of the information. Number 2 here says a solicitation which contains a provision that requires negotiation or evaluation by a governing body or an evaluator may not be disclosed until the response is recommended for the award of a contract. That piece is important. So we got a lot of questions before about why county staff was reviewing requests for proposal responses as opposed to the board. Okay, it's because it's not possible to comply with open meeting law and this section at the same time. And there's no exemption in open meeting law for it. I did talk with the district attorney about this to confirm that.
That does not preclude a member or two of the board being on there, but still.
Correct, but I mean, as a board, there's another section of open meeting law that if I give information to one of you, then it has to be made available to all of you. So we can't give out the confidential information. Some of the proposals in the last one had proprietary information that had to be withheld. So if we give that proprietary information to one board member and not all of the board members, that would be a violation too. So, and Steve can correct me if I'm wrong, but that is my understanding.
They can't be executed the same day as the actual awarding of in a closed session.
I think that's more of a question for the district attorney than.
Or it can't be redacted from a member or two sitting on it's proprietary, probably not going to pertain to the bid. Couldn't it be redacted from the?
Well, I'll give you an example. So if there was financial information disclosed, which is generally a part of how you assess an RFP and assess a bidder's responsiveness, that has to be redacted. But if you give it to one member, and you don't give it to the others, how you're giving.
Well, at the same time, the decision is going to be made, though. We're just talking on the scoring. When the decision is going to be made, all members would have access to it at that point.
They won't have access to the proprietary information.
Because you can't give it to the public.
You gave it to us last time.
No.
It said, no, there was an assets disclosure, and there was one bidder that didn't have their assets
Or a
disclosed.
publicly traded company, which is a little bit different. And it wasn't marked proprietary information in the last round.
See, there's got to be a way around that. Can you look into that? There's got to be a way we can execute the spirit of the law and the letter of the law and still be able to have a member of the board. Because I got to tell you, that's one of my key things is having at least one member of the board evaluating. So we're not, so it's not a staff driven decision.
And I'm not necessarily opposed to it, I just don't know. how.
Yeah, no, that's no, I'm not taking you to task. I'm saying
Yeah.
there's got to be a way that we can legally do this.
Yeah, and this is why I wanted to go over this and kind of explain how this is kind of why we did things that we did.
Yeah, I apologize, Madam Chair. That got me off guard. Sorry.
I'm giving you leeway because it's a workshop.
Anyway, all right. Sorry, we can, I
Yeah.
guess, get into that in a bit.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Let's finish that. All right, so this is the RFP process that we used last time. There is some flexibility here, but this is, how staff would propose to do it. This is pretty much identical to the process that we used before. We're at step 1 right now, which is discussion on RFP requirements. That's what this meeting is for. Number 2, RFP document is drafted. So I'll take all the suggestions that come out of tonight's meeting, and staff will draft the document. Number 3, RFP document is reviewed by and approved by the Board of County Commissioners. Number 4, RFP is noticed and advertised. 5, RFP is made available to the public. County receives and responds to any questions. County receives bids. Then number 8, bids reviewed for completeness. Number 9, bids are scored and recommendation is made. And number 10, contract is awarded by the Board of County Commissioners. This is kind of a draft timeline I put together based on the last process that we went through. So the RFP drafting will be completed in September. Depending on what changes are made, my hope would be to have it back before the board in mid-September. The RFP advertised and issued. would be October through December. We use that timeline because that's what we used before, so we feel like it should probably be equal to what we had previously. RFP review is complete mid to late January. Allows for enough time to read through all of it and to prepare all the scores and everything of the rubric. RFP before the board for award in February of 2023. Contract begins March 1st of 2024. So that leaves that 1 year period there. So are there any questions on that portion of the presentation before I move on?
Not at this time that I can see, but we'll reserve the right to come back.
Okay, sounds good. All right, suggested RFP requirements for VOCC consideration. These are just a few things that you know, kind of learning from the last time and things that maybe we could have done better, just from my perspective and from staff's perspective. So a pass, no pass checklist containing the minimum requirements for a complete bid response. I believe there was a checklist in there last time, but we kind of left it a little bit more loosely defined. I think that we should determine which requirements are required. That if they're not there, then the bid would be disqualified as non-responsive. So that would be my my first suggestion. The second is additional language in the protest section. The additional language would define what happens when a protest is granted. That wasn't really in there the last time, and that's why we're here for tonight's meeting. Really. Number three, a specific question period outlined in the process. So a lot of times what folks will do with an RFP process is they'll issue the RFP, then they'll allow for like a 2-week question period where they've received questions back from potential bidders, and then they issue a response to that question. Because you have to, a response to those questions to all of the bidders, and you post it again. When you get questions, you gotta, you know, that are substantial, then you have to make sure that that information is available to everyone. And so I think a specific period in there at the beginning of the issue period would be helpful with that, rather than just, you know, otherwise it kind of opens it up for questions right up until the end. And if you get a serious question that you have to issue a response to, then you might have to extend the time frame for it. So trying to avoid that. And then a specific start date that the bidder must be ready to perform. We put March 1st, 2024. That's based on the just kind of the feedback that we received the last time we went through this process on how long it takes to order the various things that need to be ordered done. Okay. And then after some more brainstorming, you know, specific minimum requirements for transfer stations specific to size. We didn't put this in the last RFP. We didn't really define transfer stations very well. And you know, I received a question internally about what happens if somebody proposes a smaller transfer station. We're a growing community, so we should at least have what we have currently. So that was something that I thought was a good idea to throw in there. This next one is something new. Transfer station prices must be by weight and have scales at the transfer stations. We received a lot of questions recently about how that is being calculated, and this would take all of the subjectivity out of it completely. And I'm not saying that there is subjectivity in the current process, but I definitely want to make sure I clarify that. But this would make sure that, you know, you weigh in, you know, say you have 500 pounds of trash, then it makes sense. You weigh out, you pay based on that. I know Carson does it, seems to work pretty well. 500 pound increments for the first ton, and then per ton charge after the minimum 500 and a minimum 500 charge, or 500 pound charge, I should say. Provisions for a potential code enforcement program. So this was something that I had talked about last year a little bit, but we didn't have a way to do it, and I couldn't pull it together in time. But I think there would be enough time here. And a lot of municipalities, and I know like the fire department, they'll have a trailer that they own that they'll drop off at a site, and they will allow that person to fill it up, and then they will haul that trailer to the dump or a transfer station. The trailer's not the expensive part there; it's the transfer station fee. So if we had like a 1 dump a week thing where we did something like that, and we partnered with Health and Human Services for folks that can't afford that type of service on their own. So it's not open necessarily for everybody, but just for the folks that need that extra little bit of help. Something to think about for sure. And then the last thing that I'm going to suggest is mandatory trash service with a potential exemption for ag or RR20 or similar zoning districts.
Somebody call the sheriff to escort him to the car after this meeting, please.
After the meeting? How
I
about
know, let me explain though why, what my rationale is. I'm, as community development director, I'm also the head of code enforcement. And, you know, I was taking a look at a lot of the numbers and some of the information along with this. There's really only 2 legal ways in Lyon County to dispose of trash. That's 1 through trash service, or 2 through transfer station. You can't burn it, you can't bury it, you can't dump it in the hot, and you can't dump it out in the desert. So those are really the only 2 legal ways to do it. There are roughly 11,012 parcels in central Lyon County with houses on them. I use central Lyon County only for this data, just because that was the information that I had. But of the 12,000 or 11,012 parcels, 9,387 of them already have trash service. So it's a relatively small portion of the population that doesn't. 1,625 parcels that do not have trash service. Of those, 10 to 15% have had a code enforcement complaint for trash, junk, and buildup. And very high percentage of those don't have trash service at all. I had presented this information in another presentation, and that number was higher. What I didn't realize is that our system had put in some duplicates. So when somebody makes a complaint for multiple properties, so I wanted to make sure that I pointed it out, that I corrected the numbers, found my mistake, did a little deeper dive into it. So I'm not trying to mislead anybody. I think that number was closer to 30% before. So that's why I put a range in there. I mean, I could probably give you an exact number, but
Yeah, you were just tired of my phone calls.
I figured the range was safe. And since this question has already come up, of the 342, I guess it was, only 48 of those were rentals. So
Only 48?
Yeah.
Only?
Out of how many?
342.
So that's still 1/6.
Mhm.
That's still, I mean, those should be the ones, especially in rental properties, that the landlord should be first singled out for for legal action.
Yeah, so I think, and we do, and usually, honestly, with the rentals, we get pretty high compliance rate because the landlord, will generally don't take care of it. But I might come back at a later date with something else with an ordinance on that that's specifically related to code enforcement that would give us a little bit more teeth there. I don't know that we could put because it would be tough to track, but I don't know that we could put something in the RFP just for rentals. But we could do an ordinance.
We could do it in the ordinance, yeah,
Yeah. If you look at state law says that one of the things that determines habitability of a rental unit is having trash service. And it says that the landlord is responsible for it unless they've got a separate agreement in that lease agreement, or if there's a separate clause in that lease agreement that puts it on to the tenant. So it's a possibility we could address that separately, or we could just do mandatory pickup, and then we wouldn't have to do that. So, anyway,
I have a hammer.
I know, and you'll remember the first time we went through this process, I was actually not suggesting mandatory pickup. It was only after I looked at all the code enforcement numbers and the data that I felt like that was something that we should take a look at doing.
Commissioner Gray.
Just going back to the mandatory, I know the numbers are relatively low, it's less than 2,000, less than 20%.
Mhm.
But you're still saying 100% of the people will have it, and it's the 80% that don't want to be told they have to have it, that are being responsible, that don't want to have,
Mhm.
something, because the other 20% are screwed up. That's where the problem is, not the fact that, we need to address the problems, not the people that are complaints. So
So
like gun laws, I mean,
no, and I understand that, but I don't know how to tell when
you're doing
It's
your
far-
due
it's far-
diligence recommending it.
It's
but-
far easier to stop that problem before it happens than wait till it turns into a code enforcement complaint.
Well, it's same
Once it turns into this is a real picture from a Lyon County house. Once it turns into this, it's far more difficult to clean that up. Yes, sir.
I think there's a way to meet both concerns of the board and your concerns as a code enforcement. After we develop an ordinance that says after second time we're called to your place, you gotta pay for a trash dumpster.
Yeah.
And there you go, that we're not punishing everybody. Nobody likes to be punished for others' actions. I get that.
Yeah,
But there's a way that we can make it then mandatory and, it's what it is.
that could work too. I do want to point out these 10 to 15%. I mean, those are the ones that we've received complaints about, we know about. I can tell you there's others, but I don't, as I explained in my code enforcement presentations, we're largely complaint based. So if we don't receive a complaint, then it's not going to be included in those numbers. So, I mean, if we do see something blatant, we do go out and make contact with them, but it's largely complaint based. So.
But again, who's gonna enforce it though? If they're not complying with the law now, what makes you think you're gonna get trash service?
So
And pay for it, because the minute they don't pay for it, the service stops.
when it's mandatory, it functions a little bit differently. So
Water's mandatory, people don't pay that and it gets turned off.
right, and then the lien gets put on the property.
It's,
There's a way to do it, and a lot of communities do have mandatory service. I'm just throwing it out there as an idea to help with some of the code enforcement things that I see. When I did my code enforcement presentation, it was the number one, trash and junk in people's yards was the number one complaint that we got, so. Just making my suggestion, and then it is completely up to the board on what you do with
Well,
it.
since we're stuck on that one, I think this board needs to give you a decision in a form of consensus or something so that you could either eliminate it or keep it. Because I, for one, am against mandatory trash, period. I do want to deal with the rental, but that's another day, another agenda item.
Okay,
I like Rob's idea. We single out those who aren't complying and figure out a way to legally force the service on them.
I agree. I
okay.
think more of a code enforcement than mandatory, maybe we need an ordinance to give you more authority or whatever. There's a solution out there, but mandatory in Lyon County, I just don't see how that works.
Okay,
I would say mandatory in our government is a difficult thing for me to swallow on anything. I know there are some mandatory requirements, but that's not what I'm gonna buy off of.
okay,
Clear as mud.
that's fair.
So
I
without the
will be
red
bringing
pen,
back an ordinance, so.
Yeah, no, and we'll look forward to it.
I invite those. We've already talked about some of that, yeah.
Okay,
Anything else?
no, that's the end of
Oh,
my presentation.
you didn't
so.
say we were at the end.
Sorry, yeah, no, there was a question slide. I don't know if you want to go through each of these suggestions or.
We probably should look at his suggested requirements and see if we agree or disagree on any of those.
And then,
That's the beginning there.
But there's another slide too.
yeah, there is. I just was,
Okay.
if you want to start with this slide, then we can.
I like the first one, pass, no pass. If it's no pass, then it's unresponsive.
Correct.
Yeah, I didn't see anything there that I didn't agree with. Commissioner Jacobson? Any in these first four suggested requirements?
Nope.
Okay,
You hit that nail on the head.
Okay, the next 4.
Looks good. Except for that last one.
Okay.
Yeah,
And I kind of like to, well, I guess we'll hear when we get RFPs back, but the cost of the scales. Yeah.
You're north of $100,000 per scale. I can tell you that right now.
Well, it's at least 100.
At least
We're putting one in Mono County and it's gonna be right at $110,000.
And then, if I may, Madam Chair,
go ahead.
and then I assume there's maintenance and calibration on ongoing expenses to go with that.
Two times a year to keep your,
I imagine the state waste department comes out and.
Yep. Nevada Ag.
Yeah. I know somebody will come out and certify.
well, it will raise your costs to the people to get rid of their garbage, because when you factor in a scale.
The 100,000, that, I mean, with as many trips made to the transfer station on the weekend, you know, $1 or $2 or more. Right now, you've got people that are complaining left and right because they have no idea what they're gonna pay when they go in.
So you suggested a scale fee on top of the tipping fee?
No, it gets incorporated into the fee, period.
So if I could throw something out there, a typical truck bed is 3 yards. And a lot of people don't know that, but it's charged by the yard. I forget what the price is.
3 square yards, I mean, that,
Cubic yards, sorry.
yeah, and most people don't know.
Yeah, and so, you know, but the average person's probably not loading more than 500 pounds in their truck bed.
But then you also, like, if you're taking green waste out there, you know, lots and lots of tumbleweeds,
Mhm.
you know.
Yeah.
You easily come up with 9 yards, I mean.
Yeah.
And you're paying a fortune to get rid of tumbleweeds. I mean, so weight is a much more subjective, honest way of doing it. And not the other way is dishonest, it's just a better way for people to accept it.
Commissioner Anderson.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I agree. I like the idea of transitioning to a weight process, but like I said, maybe something we might want to consider is to add, like I said, a technology fee, if you will, along with the tipping fee, so that, because otherwise we're going to drive the price up for everybody. But if you put a $1 scale fee on it, then only the people that are using the transfer stations are paying that.
Should be only the people using the transfer stations using it.
Correct.
Paying it.
Yeah, so I mean, that would be something that would be a part of the proposal. I don't know that we could mandate that they put a fee on it.
No, they just base their dump fees on,
Mhm.
you know, that cost, and that's not, I mean, $100,000, you know, depending on how long the contract is and the life scale, that's nothing. I mean, it's gonna be minimal. I mean, it could be 25 cents per dump if we're talking 10 years and they get 10 years life out of the scales.
Mhm.
So it's not that, I expect honestly quite a bit more.
Any questions from down here? Commissioner Jacobson.
Um,
and then
yeah, I
Commissioner
would-
Ocadea.
In listening to our professionals in the crowd, it sounds like the scales might be, I don't know. That one I've got to digest, but as far as the mandatory trash on this one, let me figure out how I'm gonna word it. Go ahead.
Commissioner Ocadea.
Well, you'd almost need a cost analysis based on the number of people going to the dump, because Smith Valley, we've got a transfer station, but they probably don't. It'd probably take them 100 years to recoup their money, because when I go there, there's hardly anybody there. So we really need to look and see. Dayton, you know, might be 10,000 people a year, you know. And we might have 2,000. So I'm just looking at this as, we really want to charge people in Smith Valley $50 a pickup instead of like 20 now. I don't think it's going to work evenly across the county.
So Madam Chair, I think I'm ready to go. As far as the mandatory trash and then the code enforcement program, until we give code enforcement some teeth, maybe mandatory trash services enough teeth, I don't know, but I think we could marry those into that one. And as far as the scales, boy, we we have scales ready to roll by the time we roll this out? I don't know. And then are we gonna have the heavier trash left out in the desert, the lighter stuff? I don't know. I think trash is trash. If they measure it and they figure out the cubic, then we're fine. But I could see a lot of leaves showing up at the yard if we weigh it, and tumbleweeds and some of the cement chunks and whatever else maybe ended up in culvert somewhere.
Or we can not have scales and we can do like all the contractors do now. You got heavy stuff, you go pay by the cubic yard at the transfer station. And if you got light stuff, you go get on the scale. Either, people are gonna play the game one way or the other, so.
Right.
My curiosity, yeah, I see one already standing up. I was gonna say, my curiosity would be maybe a couple of opinions from you guys, what you think about the scales.
Opinion number one, when you have a low volume transfer station such as the transfer stations out in eastern Nevada, you don't see the scales due to the costs. The scales are more common in the Las Vegas area, or we don't have any in Reno, or you see them in Sacramento, where there's constant vehicle traffic over that scale. That's what I've seen in the industry.
You do have them in Carson, which is about a
Yeah.
similar size county.
Brand new one.
And again, for the record, if you're speaking, every time you get up, you have to announce who you are.
Oh, I'm sorry, I pointed him out and didn't have him say his
It's only
name.
Alsessi Research.
You want to spell that for the record?
Oh, sure.
Just once.
TILLIOLCESE.
Thank you.
But that's what I'm seeing now, when you got transfer stations and then you've got like Carson that has the scale, so. Especially the contractors, I mean, they weigh, okay, what am I delivering today? Or did it rain last night and is it even heavier now today? So they'll make that decision if they're gonna drive to, say, Dayton transfer station, or if they're just gonna drive a little bit further and hit the scale, and so. We have scales available around. I don't know that putting that cost on the transfer stations is really cost effective. Commissioner Henderson, you had a question. I saw a hand over there.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I was just wondering if we could craft the RFP with that option in there. And let the people, the experts who are gonna run the transfer stations, let us know if it makes more sense to do it, the way we're doing it now, or to go through the expense to put the scale in.
The way it's written now, it is an option. I mean, we don't specify that it has to be cubic yards.
Commissioner Burke.
Couldn't there be like an in-between, like NHP uses their, for their commercial enforcement? I mean, they have mobile scales. They put them under the vehicle. Mr. Earl says he wants to answer that one.
I don't think those scales are legal for trade. I think there's a legality issue there.
If they've got to hold up in court for a citation, if they're saying somebody's overweight and they're giving them a multi-$1,000 fine.
I looked into that. I didn't get too far.
Anyway, I think leaving it as an option makes more sense, but I don't want that to be a weighted item in the RFP for approval. I mean, either they want to use them or they don't want to use them.
How would that be an apple to apple, if they're.
That's why I said it
Yes,
can't be a
it's-
weighted item.
So it should be a requirement or not a requirement to include that on the cost of, because that's gonna affect the dump fees. Where they did their dump fees.
That's true. So I say take it out. Commissioner Jacobs said, well, you guys,
I'm good to hear.
okay,
This-
I keep looking this way, so throw something at me if you have to.
You're doing a great job.
Daryl Brown, DNS Waste Removal. We have a 2-tiered or 3-tiered system anyway at the transfer stations right now. We had to go up because of the fuel, but it's $12 for MSW, municipal solid waste, and then it's $15 or in that area for construction debris. And it's measured with a tape measure, and it's cubic yards, so you tell your people, hey, stuff it in there. So, yeah, on sheet rock, you might come out a little better if you had a scale. But the way it's figured in the garbage business, they don't even have one in Reno at Sudro. They do it by the yard, because it is the landfill always runs one, because that's how they charge us, is by the ton, but it would be quite costly, because sometimes in Smith Valley in the wintertime, we might get, 10 people the whole weekend. So, yeah, like I said, we just priced one out, or it's on the way, actually, it's a 70-foot scale. You can do a 50-foot scale, but it's almost the same price, and they're right about $105,000, so it's quite an expense. And you're still going to have a minimum to get into the transfer station. If a person comes in with 2 bags, there's still gonna be a minimum charge. There might have styrofoam in it, but we still have to transport that to the landfill, so there's still a minimum. So,
Thank you. Go ahead, and state your
Yeah,
name, please.
I'm Kevin Brown, Venus Waste Removal, also a California side. Also, when you do leases, talking about the minimums, in Mono County, there's, people can bring in 2 bags, there's still $7.50 for them to come through the door. So it does, even though we have a scale there, they have a scale on there, it's $7.50 just to cross the scale. So you're still gonna have that. And then we have 2 transfer stations, so we're not just talking about $100,000, we're talking $200,000, one for Smith Valley, one for Barrington. It takes us a long time to recoup that money unless we raise those prices, and that's the last thing you wanna do. And then I wanna also comment on the mandatory trash service. You guys you're forgetting the other side. When we don't get paid, we now have to lean on these people. And those percentages you have, those are the same percentage people that aren't gonna pay. And we're gonna be ending up in court, having to go do a small claims court, lien on the properties, and we spend all that money and that time in our office. And then that causes us to have more work, and we have to raise our prices for that too.
I think mandatory is off the table though. I mean,
Yeah.
we
Yeah,
took
but
that
I'm
one
just
too.
backing that up some more to say, it's just not, I'm glad you guys said that, it's a pretty good idea.
So I do want to be clear on the minimum charge, though. They still do charge a minimum of 1 cubic yard, so you'd still be charged the same for 2 bags.
Well, you're paying a service no matter what,
Mhm,
and then you go from there.
exactly.
If I may, I think some of the recent noise about the cost at the transfer stations, people don't realize it's by the yard.
Mhm.
So I think in our RFP we need to require good signage at the transfer stations where the rates are clearly displayed.
Yeah, I just know I've received a whole bunch of calls recently.
Oh, you're not the only one. So I'm good with pulling the scales off also, but there's gotta be continuity in the way those yards are measured, because from Greg to the next guy to whoever's out there now, I mean, you could literally pay one cost one day and 3 times the cost, now. So I think it's more in the, whoever is, I don't know what you call them out there, the operator out there, than it is the actual, cost or anything. It's gotta be measured the same way each and every time, not just, hey, I think that's, so many yards. So it's a process question, and a process problem.
Now I'd like to move beyond his suggested requirements
Absolutely. So,
and add our own list to your list.
absolutely.
Did we get to a consensus about the scales though?
Oh, I thought we did.
Well, if it's already an option.
It was a
now,
secret ballot,
It's
yes.
an option. I mean,
But that's saying it can't be an option going forward. Like it pointed out to Commissioner Keller, it either has to be a requirement or not be a requirement. I'm for removing the requirement, so everybody's bidding the exact same thing.
okay.
Right, yeah.
So
No, I was all for remove it, so
Okay, we'll go with that.
remove it. Okay,
There you
you
go.
got your, everybody's nodding their heads. So,
I'm just gonna stop this real quick, so.
What about hazardous waste?
All right,
okay, so one of the first ones I want to throw out there,
Mhm.
and we'll just go down the line here, but one of the first ones, and came to light the last time around is I don't feel that the bidders were bidding apples to apples. So I would like to see the wording to where all of our bidders are bidding it as if it's the first time they ever came to Lyon County and they're gonna have to tool up. So that they're all on the same sheet of music. So,
So you're saying new equipment and
New-
bids?
right, new equipment, whatever it's required for them to start up in our county to fit it accordingly, so that nobody gets an advantage over another bidder. I want apples to apples. I don't want any tangerines or mandarins.
So
Grapefruit.
I understand where you're coming from. So the Carson City, when they did their bid, they required all new vehicles because they were tired of hydraulic fluid. For us, it's a way of maintaining the roads, but for Carson,
Now,
for Carson, it wasn't so
It
good.
actually erodes the roads, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct, I'm just being smart. So, but.
well, then I want a gravel truck right behind them so we
But
can get
then-
some
but then-
gravel on that oil.
So on the trash pickup side, pickup and transportation side, that's relatively simple. What do you do on the transfer station side when one of the bidders potentially, two of the bidders potentially, already have transport stations in place?
Yeah, I don't think we could require them to bid it as if they were building transfer stations, even though they might not, if there's somebody that is existing. Trucks and bins, we could certainly include that in. I don't know that we could fix the price like that.
I just want everybody on the same playing field,
But they're not going
as
to.
close as possible.
And unless the current franchisee didn't bid the project, they're never going to be, and regardless of who the current franchisee is. John McNown comes back from the grave and decides to bid against the Brown brothers. He's never gonna be able to meet all the needs because Daryl and Kevin have run DNS waste for the last, well, since I was a kid, so.
But I'm willing to equipment though.
Yeah, well, definitely new equipment.
Yeah, I mean, whatever language we could put in there to make it as even as possible. I don't wanna cause all the other companies to be at a disadvantage because one company already exists. So I think we need to have all new equipment considered in the RFP when they bid.
Okay.
And you're right, I mean, if they already have a transfer station, we can't really take that away from them.
And where the disparity, I'm trying to think the only disparity that come in, as much as I don't like it, I wanna have a perfectly level playing field. That would probably only come into play, I can't think of any other instances, would be at the transfer station fees, the dump fees, at the transfer station.
Wait a minute, I got a question real quick.
Yes,
You brought it up earlier about the requirements of a transfer station. I don't know that the transfer stations that we currently have would meet what our new requirements are going to be in the RFP. So should we bring that back as a discussion of what your parameters are going to be, Andrew, to recommend for a transfer station? That should be part of that RFP, because it might make a difference.
can I phone a friend and ask somebody in the audience? How much is a new transfer station gonna cost compared to scales?
Quite a bit more. Next question.
You know, but
That going a friend wasn't help much help.
but I think Commissioner Keller makes a valid point.
The one that we're building in Multnomah County is
Yeah.
$1.5 million.
Yeah, because we're gonna put standards on transfer stations
And you're the one that brought them up.
The
to
ones
have
that
a
is
standard
currently
on.
may not meet it.
I did, I mean, I was gonna use the ones that we have now as the standard, but
But I don't know that there's.
Well, and, yeah, as long as we're talking about that, you know, as far as requirements, I already thought about this earlier. There's a lot of garbage that blows out of that transfer station, and that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, all over my property.
No, all over the desert, and it's not,
Yeah.
Well,
You know,
it's-
and
it's
so
trash
that-
property to it.
there may need to be.
So
some-
develop it.
That's what a trash dump.
Paper recycling.
all right.
So that,
Okay,
I
guys.
mean, so we may need to look at those standards and incorporate that.
Opinions from my left, because I have my back to you all night tonight.
That's fine, Madam Chair. I'm all for pie in the sky and everything, but at the end of the day, I still want to keep this affordable to our folks in Lyon County. And I think some of the things we're talking about, I mean, I would like to see a brand new garbage truck would come rolling down every dirt road that they're gonna service, but it doesn't take long for some of these roads to wear out a brand new garbage truck too, so. I think pie in the sky needs to meet the reality of what the people in Lyon County can afford on a monthly basis.
Well, I still think we need to look at, the future of our citizens, because when we approve an RFP, it's not for 1 year or 2 years, it's a lot of years out. And we need to look at that customer service that they're going to get as well moving forward. Commissioner Hockaday, sorry, I kind of skipped you and went back to me.
No, that's all right. I'll eventually get to say what I want to say. The thing I'm concerned with transfer stations is I know some are very unhappy with what they have. I mean, we're very happy out in Smith Valley as far as I'm concerned. Good facility, easy to get to, centrally located. I'd have to see what the disappointments are in other areas. And maybe that's something when we actually put the nuts and bolts together on some of these things. Is there a problem with trash blowing everywhere? I don't want that to happen. How's that going to be repaired? What do we need to do to these transfer stations? And so if we're going to request something to be fixed, let's tell them this is unacceptable. And therefore, we want these things to be taken care of. And so what's it going to cost you to do that, whether it's the current people or not?
So all new equipment and standards on the transfer stations will probably get us real close to what we want.
What size transfer stations do you want to see?
Based on the community.
I think some recommendations.
I was just gonna say, probably bring back some
Some recommendations for us
recommendations to
to,
us.
because we're not trash experts, we don't speak garbage.
And I would be very
Well,
careful
it
with,
must be trash, but
I would be very careful with standards that are, as he said, based on the community. I think you go some minimum standards. So example, if you say 25,000 square feet, which I don't know if that's realistic or not, that's never gonna work in Smith Valley. We're never gonna have that much trash in Smith Valley in 1 year, let alone on a weekend, right? How big is the one in Mason Valley?
That's 80 by 100.
So 8,000 square feet, right? So those are some of the considerations. But when you say by community, then 5 years from now, all of a sudden, Silver Springs has 27,000 people.
Can we do pop caps? Legislature does, can we?
So those are some of the concerns that I have with, when you want to compare apples to apples, we also have to be aware that we can't predict the future for populations when they go in the county. I mean, Smith Valley's the oddball because one, not many people can afford to live there or buy there right now. And two, there's not a whole lot of property available to build a home on. So it's a little bit different, but Central Lyon County corridor, lots of places to buy property and build. So you can see a change in population in Silver Springs easily in 10 years, that all of a sudden now we've outgrown the transfer station and we got trash blowing everywhere.
I will take a look at it and bring some.
And bear in mind, we are the oddball county. When you look at maybe other than Nye County, we're the only ones that have the population, geographic population issues. All the rest of them are central. I mean, Churchill County, yeah, there's a few pockets out there. Douglas County, there's a few pockets out there. But we have 5 distinct community bases, and within that 5, we have 2 like in Dayton, you have 3 community bases all wrapped up into one. So it makes it more difficult and challenging to get some of those issues addressed.
And Nye County has 3.
And
Commissioner Gray,
Mr. County Manager, I would apply that, actually, there's a 6th one that, I saw it today, actually said 14 miles to Weed Heights. We have never dealt with Weed Heights on anything, but they are definitely their own little community up there.
yes, they are.
We've never heard anything about Weed Heights.
Like that.
I know.
I was gonna say, Wheat Heights is a great place to go.
It is.
And it's a very good secret.
Never realized it was on a distance 2 sign until today.
Commissioner Henderson, you had something to add?
Okay.
Oh, anything back here? I'm gonna go out to the public a little bit.
Well, Then let me ask you a question first. Are we done with our suggestions?
Oh, no.
Okay. Carry on.
I have a man that wants to speak. He stood up.
You got two of them. You got one that's been sitting over there raising his hand forever.
Okay, so I thought I'd get a couple of opinions here and then we'll come back. So, Mr. Russ, if you would please
My
introduce
name is
yourself.
Russ Wright. I live at 331 Sweetwater Circle here in Dayton. And I don't really care whether you have large transfer stations or scales. I want to ask a question that's going to cause Mr. Page to grow hair. Is there any point in this process, in the draft process, for public input? Like you do for practically every government contract or environmental study, or in some cases of contract awards, there's a point in time in the draft process where there's public input. Sorry, Jeff.
That's what we're doing here tonight.
Well, and how many of these meetings did we have previous before and over years of getting public comment on the needs?
Right, but the public never saw the draft before it went to the final RFP. They had suggestions here that may or may not get included, may or may
The
not get
draft was
considered.
posted before. it went out.
The draft was posted as part of an agenda item.
You know, so his point is that we didn't have a special community meeting throughout for the public to take a look at the draft and voice their concerns about the draft before it went to the board. And I get that. And if the board wants to do that, just understand that lengthens the time for the RFP to go out. Or for the RFP to be awarded. Sorry.
Gotcha. So. Who was it that? Please state your name for the record.
Johnny Grahamian from Silver Spring. I've been a commercial trucker all my career, and I've dealt with scales from the very beginning. Not only have I dealt with scales, but I've hauled scales here out of Fernley. Some of the nicest scales built anywhere. They're beautiful things at Rice Lake. I also am a 18-year resident of Lyon County, and I've hauled my own trash the entire time. I have taken advantage of the waste management transfer station in Fernley on a fairly regular basis. And I've gone in there with expectations of what it's gonna cost me one way or another. But I've always gone in there with the thought that I was built on a cubic yard basis. And yes, my rates have always been different one time or another, but usually within very close. And it's always been up to the person at the entry kiosk to view what I've got in my trailer, to essentially take a rough estimate of what cubic yards is. My comment on this is, in my case, it's worked great all these years. Yes, I am at the mercy of some guy standing in a building who I don't know, and sometimes there's more and sometimes there's less. And a lot of it has to do with my own honor. When I walk in the door, what have you got in the trailer? I'm not gonna tell you that, maybe I've got a refrigerator buried under all the crap in the back of the trailer. And that's not the point. It all comes down to my own honor. He asked me what I've got in the trailer. I tell him what I've got in the trailer. We look at the trailer and he says, okay, it's gonna cost this much. Okay, fine, and I paid for it. Now, with that in mind, I would actually not like to go into a transfer station and deal with another scale, because you got weigh in, unload, weigh out, and at that time, you still don't know how much you're gonna pay until that. I know from the very beginning, I'm paid before I even take the tarp off the top of my trailer, and yes, I use one because I don't wanna walk up 95 picking up garbage. Those are just my comments. Again, the scales I think are very expensive, and I think they are a very diminishing return for what you get for your money. Yes, you rely upon the trash providers to look at what you're bringing in and to value that. Now, I'm talking only as a homeowner. I'm not, contracting in, and I'm not bringing in any, and I do take advantage of the Lyon County Yard Waste Trailer every year. That's for the, again, yard waste. The trailer comes in, they set the trailer down. I got 3 days to fill the trailer up. They hook up the trailer, away it goes, doesn't cost me a dime. It's one of the things that Lyon County has surprised me with. So with those 2 processes available to me, and first of all, it makes no sense. it's hard. It's hard. Oh, that was my time.
It was.
Those were my comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thought our cell phone went off.
Mr. Mike,
Good evening, Mike.
twice in one day.
Yes, yeah, double trouble. Resident here in Dayton, and I just wondered if we could clarify a little bit on the equipment. When prospective bidder, you're suggesting that they purchase all new equipment. I mean, to me, that seems like it's gonna raise the cost significantly, potentially, for everyone. And to say that all of Waste Management's current equipment is leaking oil is not correct. I mean, some of it does, but some of it is fairly new. And perhaps, I mean, I'd hate to shoot ourselves in the foot to force Waste Management, if they chose to bid, to go out and purchase all new equipment, if they've got 5 brand new trucks or relatively new trucks sitting in the yard, and perhaps you put an age 1 to 5 years or some kind of parameter, because if they buy all new trucks, any contractor that buys all new trucks over a certain period of time, they're gonna have to buy all new trucks. Normally you phase your purchases, you rotate them over, and I know in bidding some large snow removal contracts up at Incline, we wouldn't have been able to afford commercial snow removal had the contractors had to buy all new equipment, and some of it was new, but a lot of it was fairly old too. So I think doesn't that take the competitiveness and the goal of the lowest cost for the end user, the customer, doesn't that take that off the table by requiring such an expense? It's no different than requiring brand new scales or a brand new transfer station. So I don't think we should lose sight of keeping the costs low in reasonable manners. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Scott Keller, I'd have to agree with Mr. Workman as far as getting the time frame on that. But also, if we don't want to import all the old trucks into Lyon County to get the most competitive bid on certain things. So we don't want them to where the other people go, okay, we got to unload everything low into Lyon County. As far as the scales, I use them quite often as far as using it as in construction. So we got to look at it overall. It's not just personal trash. How can the county evolve and where we're going to look at in 10 years? If we do anything, maybe we should have a scale centrally located, one set of scales, so that at least we can have an option on how we do stuff. If not, we're gonna end up with all the old stuff, the heavy stuff, the refrigerators, all out in the desert. Where right now I offer my trailer all the time to people and I take it to the dumps, because when I pay by the pound, it's like $30 to drop off a full trailer. Or if I stop at the transfer station, it's way beyond, no one's gonna do it. So I don't mind doing that. So give us an option and put it into the bid, at least one scale, and that's it, you know, and we can build. But we're gonna have more trash. I hate to tell you, but we're gonna hopefully grow in this county. So we're gonna end up with more trash, more problems, and we'll start solving them now on one spot at a time.
Please state.
For the transfer
Say
station.
your name again, please.
I'm sorry, Tom Smith.
Tom Smith, thank you.
For the transfer stations that we have in the area, are they on, do we own the property or does the transfer companies own those properties?
The transfer company.
Okay, so with the possibility of the area is growing, as we know, right? And the size of the transfer stations that we do we have areas available? So if Dayton or Stagecoach or Silver Spring, and in these areas double or triple in size of the population, do we even have an area or even a plan that transfer station now that we have in 5 years, 10 years is too small? Do we have another place to take our trash? Have we looked at that feasibility yet?
We're gonna get to that item, right?
Well, I think also without going there, to answer that one though, that would be up to the transfer station operator to increase their removal from that transfer station at a, at a more frequent rate, I guess. I mean, that's not a,
Building and, building materials and trash and everything else is gonna become.
yeah, but I mean, that's, they run into that problem now. And they just have to, call in. I don't know who you guys call in or what you guys do, but you guys schedule removal out of there pretty frequently. I mean, it's a transfer station. It's not a dump where it just stays there.
Mr. Andy.
Andy C. Jack, I live in Stagecoach. This is a question about the transfer stations. In the RFP, do we have to ask questions or set up for things like taking the 3 times washed insecticide containers from agriculture, half-gallon buckets of paint? Does that enter into what we're asking in the RFP?
Are you referring to hazardous materials?
Yeah.
I didn't want to use that, but yes.
But it is.
Methyl.
I have to go back and look and see.
I thought we had some, I couldn't remember what page. I thought there was something.
I thought we increased the.
And I slipped my paint cans into my father and mother-in-law's trash bin.
Cover the grass.
Anyway.
Moving on.
Right.
Oil, antifreeze.
So the current provision in in this RFP is that there would be a program held at each transfer station in the county, a minimum of once annually. And that's pretty common. I mean, if you look at other spots in the region, a lot of places don't take it. It's kind of difficult. So having a program once annually where people can bring it in, I think is pretty standard.
So when we say once annually, 1 hour, 1 day, 1 weekend, 1 period of a week.
So in the past, we've done them, it's been 1 day on a weekend, as example, the last one we did was in Silver Springs a few years back. We probably went all day long, and by 1 o'clock in the afternoon.
When you say we, the county did it, or the franchisee did it?
Us in support, us with the support of Waste Management, Central Lyon County Fire Protection District, North Lyon County Fire Protection District.
That is how it's worded.
Yeah, within from 9 o'clock in the morning to 1 o'clock in the afternoon, Dayton and Fernley were full. That's how much household hazardous materials we took in 4 hours period of time.
And you just hit the nail on the head, because I was gonna say, I think it needs, with the growth, I think it needs to be probably, so it doesn't wind up in mom and dad's bin.
So I think you could add provisions to the franchise, to the bid document addressing household hazardous materials and allowing, either requiring the franchisee to provide that service on a regular basis, or allowing that franchisee to contract with companies that provide that service. For example, Hero Environmental, I'm just familiar with them because they did a cleanup for us of a homeless camp. So that's how I'm familiar with them. That's what they specialize in. They do all the stuff that nobody else wants to do. So you can provide in the franchise, either they do it or they have the ability to contract out to somebody else to do it. Because then the challenge becomes is what will a landfill take? And what is truly a household hazardous material? When we did the first one years ago in Fernley, we had Fallon EOD there to take care of cases of dynamite and 27 hand grenades. Hand grenades are not household hazardous materials.
That could have been,
They were all
taking care of itself.
They wound up all being duds with some guy who collected them, and it had everybody on edge and everybody was going nuts.
Yeah, 'cause that was actually one of my points on here, more frequent hazmat, and make sure it's hazardous, but I don't know, maybe even just, maybe narrow that down to paint and other things, I mean, are more common. I don't know, we get a lot of Johnny do-it-yourselfers around here.
Paint, household cleaners, dusters, batteries.
Tires.
Oh. I think you pay for tires. I just wondered if it needed to be included in the bid process.
That is a good question, if you don't mind me asking.
4 tires a year or something like that.
Yeah,
It
can we-
seems like I read that somewhere in one of our pages, that we could at
Okay.
least have a certain number. And then, because a lot of times they show up in their ditch.
Kendra, do you want to comment on that? What is it currently?
Yeah, for tires.
And can you take extras to the transfer station and pay additional, or, I mean, like, you know, there's special fees for washers and dryers. You took 2 tires over there, you know, can you pay $8 and then,
Tires are called out on the rate sheet, yeah.
okay.
I don't know off the top of my head what the rate is.
I have it here.
I think
Just
Smith
kidding.
Valley quit.
What'd you say?
I thought I had it here. I do.
It is in here somewhere.
I have it. It
That
was
was
in this
fun.
morning's. packet.
All right,
That was fun.
I'm sorry, but it's time to take the brain squeeze off.
So, okay, and one second. So with that being said, so it actually calls out in the, so that they supply the service, it's just a matter of what that fee is going to be.
Page 45,
That was it.
Do you find the page?
yes, I think.
Up to 20 inches, it is 14.39. Oh, sorry, 14.95.
Size
Is
matter.
paint on the list?
No, because that would be a hazardous material, so it's handled separately.
Go ahead.
Yeah, Kevin Brown, DNS Waste again. Also in hazardous waste, I know in California, I don't know if state of Nevada does it. When you're gonna do a hazardous waste event, the county actually takes care of it at their transfer stations. And they might wanna be involved with the transfer stations of Waste Management or us or whatever. And they usually cover the cost because there's a lot of permitting involved when you start hauling hazardous waste across the highway. You just can't go say, I'm gonna have a hazardous waste event at my transfer station. I'm gonna collect everything. You get caught out on the highway with gases, fuels, oils, all kinds of other stuff. You're gonna get a ticket. You're gonna get almost thrown in jail. So it would have to be a county operated program where the county actually maybe have to apply for some permits to actually do this, and then we could do it at the transfer stations at that point in time if you would like.
Jeff parks his truck in front of the county building all the time, we'll just put it back to his truck.
And then on the new vehicle request on your bid, we have trucks that are 10 years old and they're approved, they're DOT approved. They work great. These companies make these garbage trucks to last 20 years without any issues. Yeah, if we break a line, anything that gets used is gonna break a line every once in a while, everything. Our trucks don't leak oil. We fix them. If we find something, we fix them immediately. I think putting new vehicles in a bid just takes away anybody else but your big corporations, because we just bought a brand new front loader last year, $330,000. I just bought a brand new pump truck this last year, $220,000. We have roughly 25 trucks between roll-offs, front loaders, residential trucks, fork trucks, transfer trucks, trailers. Waste Management has about 180 to 250, depending on if you're in Carson, clear through Incline, something almost up, probably up where near it's 300. In this area, they probably have 35, 40 vehicles, maybe 50. You're gonna tell them to go buy 50 trucks, 50 vehicles to operate. Nobody can do it. Even Waste Management, Waste Connections, or whatever bidding assessees, we can't. And then we have the period of waiting a year and a half to get a truck. Right now, I'm waiting just now a year and a half to get a new pump truck from International. It won't be here till March. I ordered it last year. So you won't get those trucks in time, and there won't be new equipment. I think if it's legal, if it's not leaking, if it's DOT approved, been bid checked and everything else, that truck shouldn't be a problem, and anybody bidding shouldn't have to be worried about where they're gonna come up with $4 million to buy trucks, to be able to bid and be able to have a bid in the county. Otherwise, you're just taking everybody out.
I agree.
And you can't do that. That doesn't work. So that's
Commissioner.
How often are your trucks certified by DOT?
we do it, every service that we do, every 10,000 miles, we service our own trucks and we are allowed to do our own bids. So we check our brakes,
And we drive them every day. So it's not like, you know, at least for our company, we all drive, brother and I, we do all the services, we do the brakes, we do the tires. We do our whole setup, and I'm sure Ceci does basically the same thing. So we're on them all the time. I can't answer for Waste Management. I can't answer for Waste Connections or CES. I can't answer for them. I don't know what they do, how they do it. But I'm sure they have guys in their trucks. They have people working. They don't want anybody hurt. I guarantee you that.
And I imagine you guys keep pretty comprehensive maintenance records.
Yep. Yeah. Got every bill, everything replaced. If it's something more major, it goes to Peterbilt International or one of the major truck repair shops in Reno. It gets sent back and everything's fine. I think if everybody has, I mean, you can check the trucks before you allow a bid if you want to. Make sure you could go and say, hey, I want that fixed or this or that, or put that in the bid that your truck's upon inspection. If something's messed up or we get a call or something, that truck has to be fixed. That's fine. We don't mind that, but I mean, 25 trucks, you're talking millions of dollars to replace those. Because we're all in South County. So if you tell us we gotta have new trucks and vehicles, we can't do it. There's no way. And our trucks aren't a problem anyway. So these trucks last, you know, minimum 15, 20 years. If maintenance, things like right, which we do, they'll last 30. We got some trucks that are 30 years old right now. They can go down the road and pick up garbage every day and never have a problem.
Commissioner Hockaday?
Yeah, I was just gonna say earlier that all of these bids are gonna include maintenance over the period of the contract. I mean, they're not gonna cut themselves short. If they think their truck's gonna wear out, they're gonna say, well, we've got a 5-year contract, we need a new truck. We need to throw that in there. They're not gonna, I honestly believe that if anybody worth their salt that's in business is gonna figure out what's costing them over the years of the contract.
Well, it's a matter of making the bids apples to apples, because you have an existing company that has equipment already in place, whether it's in good shape or not. Some of it is, some of it isn't, but then you've got other companies are trying to be competitive in their bids that are gonna have to come in with new equipment.
True.
Now, that new equipment, we can make a determination on what that looks like, whether that is brand new or put a year on it, which was also mentioned here. But to give any one company an unfair advantage over another,
I wouldn't
I
say unfair, I'm just gonna correct on that. I would say a competitive advantage in the bidding process. It's not necessarily unfair, but they get to recognize economies of scale
right,
because they've already got the customer base. So, sorry. I didn't see like it was unfair. It's just,
well. So what direction does the board want to go in?
I mean, well, nobody's saying they can't use those vehicles if somebody gets the bid. But I think to compare apples to apples and oranges to oranges, I think they need to all approach it as if they're getting the contract for the first time. Otherwise, I think we cut viable bidders out.
So I think you either have to require new equipment or not. I don't think you can say, well, you can use your existing equipment, but you gotta bid it as if you're buying new equipment. I don't think that's, I don't think you can, I don't think we can do that.
And you wouldn't be able to have garbage service because we have to charge you about $400 a service to pay for our trucks.
You'll be back bidding it again.
Yeah. It's a competitive bid. So apples to apples, oranges to oranges, each bidder is gonna bid it the way that he thinks he can get the job done. And it should not be, yeah, if he's got junk, that's not going, you know, it's not gonna fly. And his price will probably show that too. But you have to, as far as trying to do a bid, apples to apples, oranges to oranges, I don't see where you're going. It's based on the service and the price to the consumer of the area. So I don't understand how you're trying to go about this on apples to apples, oranges to oranges, because that's how you, when you do a bid, you try to figure out the best way to do it and the most economical to the people and the best service. That's what you do.
So if I may make a suggestion, remember that list of things that we can use to evaluate the proposals and determine who is the lowest responsible and responsive bidder? Equipment was one of the things that we can do in that. And so we had a scoring rubric in the last RFP that listed out what was important and what wasn't important. We did require in the previous bid to the previous time that we went through this process, a detailed list of exactly what equipment they were planning on putting into place here in Lyon County. So if that's something that is, it doesn't necessarily have to be based on the price. I mean, and what I say by that, when I say that is that's one of the factors that you rated on. So you can also put equipment as an item in that scoring rubric. I did a really choppy job of explaining that, but that's.
No, that makes sense, and I think that kind of levels it out. I mean, yeah, have the scoring rubric, let them know, are they coming?
Well, we're
with
trying to
new
level
equipment?
the playing field.
And that, I think
For
that
everybody.
moves us, in that direction.
Yeah, but, I don't know if we're actually leveling the playing field or trading a hypothetical,
No, they would have to identify,
you know?
they'd have to identify their equipment, and have to be able to.
No, I understand that.
If that's a consideration that the board wants to use, and I'm just, that is an
we
option.
tell them what it is we want? And as a business person, it's their responsibility to determine whether or not they can meet our demands. And we can often put in there, if you mess up, there's also a cost to you.
That's Andy Seachat from Stagecoach.
For the record.
Yes,
for
for
the
the
record.
record.
And before that was, I'm sorry, what's your name? sir?
Daryl. And Scott again.
Keller.
Scott Keller. I'm hearing a couple different things. I thought we were going for a request for proposal. And I believe there's gonna be contract negotiations afterwards of when you do something. So when you say it's a bid, it's not a bid, it is a proposal.
Right.
And when you go for everything, what you're proposing is everything is on a level playing field. So you're saying everybody's gonna do this. In other words, you're not saying the service, you're defining certain things in that service. So I can't undercut something because I have that, and I'm not gonna pick on a certain person, but I have a trash can that is broken to pieces that I carry out there and I pinch my hand on everything else. And if that's what I get for the next 10 years, it will be trash. So it's a proposal. And then you go to contract negotiations and what you can negotiate, what equipment and everything else in the negotiations. So let's go to the proposal and get back to that. Yeah.
Go ahead, Mike.
One more time. I mean, what's the?
Got little heads going.
On one of your first
Mike
slides.
Workman for the record.
I'm sorry, Mike Workman, Dayton. Aren't we, the RFP is for, what was the wording, Andrew, that you used, lowest or best responsive bidder?
It's lowest responsive and responsible bidder.
There you go. That, and if you, and again, in my opinion, with the equipment or those type of things, it's either gonna eliminate potential bidders, or it's gonna end up, there's gonna be a challenge on that. I mean, on heavy construction, when you're bidding pipeline jobs, you don't eliminate Granite or Q&D because they've got the most equipment. They do have some junk, but they've got resources that are deep, and you count on that to get the best price. And we've got to remember the lowest cost, the most responsive bidder at the lowest price. And one quick comment on the household hazardous waste. Incline Village has a great program called Waste Not. It's been in operation for many years. And also Carson City operates a household hazardous waste program, and a lot of those are NDP funded, and they've got seed money and those type of things that may or may not be available. And it is operated by the counties or the GIDs, and it's very very restrictive and permit and cost, not cost prohibitive, but it's very costly. They're great programs. Thank you.
Madam Chair, if I may. So, since we're talking about what we want in an RFP, one of the things I think it's important for the board, because we've had some discussion about this, but I haven't heard it said yet, is ensuring a local point of contact. So I live in Mason Valley, and if I'm not happy with trash service and Daryl doesn't answer his phone, I know where he lives. But we don't have that with the Central Lyon County corridor per se, depending on who gets the franchise. If it's still Waste Management or OCs or somebody else, somebody out of San Francisco decides they're gonna bid on it. So I think it's something that's very important that we include that the request for proposal is that there is a local point of contact within Lyon County for the franchise holder. So the public has not a 1-800 and I get somebody in New York State answering a phone.
Or they'll call you back in 3 days.
Yeah, I think so, because
I
that's a.
thought that was in the.
Yeah, I thought that was.
It was in there.
It may be, but I just want to make sure that that is, because that's the biggest complaint I've gotten in the 4 or 5 emails I've gotten in the last 2 days about this is we want somebody to talk to who's here in Lyon County, who understands Lyon County. Yeah, so.
I believe that's in the first one.
So for the record, we're asking for it to be the next one too.
Yeah, yeah, so far I don't think we're eliminating anything on the first one, we're adding to it.
We'll clarify.
So,
Yeah, I mean, and if there is something that you think should be eliminated.
Yeah, well, yeah, if you want to bring that up, the only thing I think should be eliminated was the weighted scoring.
So on page 16,
Yes, page
On-
16, local
on page
telephone.
16B. Local telephone number.
And A is the franchisee shall maintain an office in Lyon County.
You want to talk about the?
Let's talk about it. Weighted scoring.
well, can we wrap up where we're at?
Okay, well, he asked for elimination, so we're doing elimination. I think Jeff was trying to
We'll go
move
to
this
scoring
along.
next, but yeah, let's wrap up where we're at on this whole equipment thing. Peanut gallery, really?
Tilio says TILLIO LLCESE. In the RFP, new or refurbished equipment, maybe there's an option to keep costs down. Painting bins, making them look presentable. So there's an option.
Or,
Go ahead.
if I may, thank you, Madam Chair. Another option would be some kind of definition there of what is considered an acceptable level of service by a vehicle. Someone said your age is one, mileage. I mean, there's some way you can define what you want in equipment. It doesn't necessarily have to be brand new, or actually maybe a better way would just have them say what equipment they're gonna provide and the age of the fleet.
I would just caution that you put age, some of these guys have incredible mechanics and they can make, and they take care of, they change oil regularly, they do that. I would caution us about saying mileage or age because of the maintenance programs that they may be on. I would just, wherever we go here, let's just say our first time we tried this, let's just say it was $40 a month. Let's not forget that if it ends up being $50 a month after we redo this one, we're gonna get some fun emails.
We're gonna get those anyway.
Madam Chair, I think it's important to, what's the end goal? Provide a quality trash pickup and disposal operation at an affordable rate for our constituents. Hopefully, when we get done with this, we increase our people getting their trash picked up through the franchisee by 20% because the rates are affordable. My concern with requiring all new equipment countywide is you're gonna jack prices up. And then I'm going to have a bigger code enforcement problem than I currently have now. especially on those large acre parcels out in the middle of nowhere. That now it's not just the guy who lives there, his neighbors are now dumping their trash in his backyard. We have a couple of those already.
I would say that I would depend on my 55 Chevy more than my 2013 Honda, okay? Because it's been well maintained. As far as I'm concerned, the companies are gonna decide what it's gonna take over the contract life to keep their service going.
Yes.
That's up to them.
Yes.
Yeah,
They're not gonna try to have their trucks, oh, we're just gonna make do and they're gonna break down. So everything is a playing field. It's gonna cost them all the same amount of money to keep the service going.
I agree with Commissioner Hockaday, Madam Chair. They're gonna develop a schedule, and if their equipment isn't getting the routes taken care of and the garbage collected when they're supposed to, they're gonna hear about it. I think that's on the person that wins the bid. I think we're beaten, sometimes when the horse is dead, you gotta get off.
The dead truck.
Yeah.
Gotta remember that one.
All right, so we'll come back to this. Commissioner Gray, you wanted to talk about how we're weighting the system.
Well, it's just, yeah, it was my number 3 item on here, and so when they said remove something,
Well, I'm gonna tie this into our last
go
discussion,
for it.
since you wanted to go there. So we put a lot of emphasis on price to our customers, like, lowest price, the last time around, and I think that was a huge mistake. Price is a huge issue for everybody, but I also think that service, more people called after the fact and was more concerned about the service they were going to get moving forward than they was the price. Price is a factor. We still want the best we can get for our citizens of Lyon County. But I think that service, which goes around to, are the cans beat up? Are the trucks beat up? Is the equipment usable? Has a lot to do with our service, kind of like having a phone number in Lyon County. Can I get a hold of somebody? Their service. So Commissioner Gray, I know you had that on your list.
Yeah, no, that's on there, and that's, how can we evaluate customer service history? I mean, we were, told we could call other counties and probably should call other counties to see how, some of the bidders had done. But yet we were told we couldn't take into account our current franchisees, customer service. I'm wondering, is there a way that if they collect customer service data, survey data, can we get a sampling of that to see, what their customer service history complaints are, say something?
No.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, because I think that is a huge part of it. I mean, goes back to the old axiom, you get what you pay for. Price is not the only consideration. It's a huge consideration, but not the only consideration. So I would love to see how we can quantify that and get that to play into the mix, because I think it's very important.
So I guess that would be my next question, is how would we quantify that?
Because my concern is, getting back to apples, oranges and oranges. So you take a company who has a current contract in a much smaller area, say 800, 900 customers, versus how many customers we have?
Well, what did I say, 9,000?
Yeah, 9,000 customers. 800, 900 customers, someplace else might be really happy with that particular company, but do they have the experience to take on the additional and can they provide the service? And that's how do you measure that? And I'm not here to say anything negative about any person bidding on the project or filling out the RFP, but that is a hard thing to quantify. I'll be honest with you, I'm perfectly happy with DNS Waste in Mason Valley. Every once in a while at 6 o'clock in the morning on Wednesday, one of those guys hollers, "Hey, Paige, wake up," and you laugh and they move on, right? Or they dump something and they come over and they clean it up and say, "Hey, if there's a fault, let us know," right? But you may not have that experience in a larger, more urban area, suburban area like Dayton, where it's a different setup because it's a different customer base. And so how do you measure that from company to company?
Commissioner Henderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was gonna ask, can you put 332 back up?
Yes.
Please.
Well, you're, Madam Chair, while they're pulling that up,
Yes.
we'll keep it along. I remember getting a lot of emails and from my experience, I will not speak for any of the emails you guys received. Price was number one, price was number two, and price was number three. So just for the record, those were my emails that I recall.
Those were posts bid though last time also, I mean, in the meetings that Rob, it was, I mean, before that, it was customer service. I mean, that was our number one complaint, it was customer
The
service.
things that we can consider.
This is the slide.
Huh?
Yeah, this is.
This,
that.
this and the next one.
Yeah.
So, and excuse me, Madam Chair, just, I asked him to bring this back up just to remind us what NRS says are the things that we can consider like under C, the qualifications. And I think we need to make sure that these, that we have in the RP, that we are going to consider all of these.
Right, well, there's your adequacy of, well, he skipped through it.
I'm trying to get back.
I got it.
The
There we go.
accuracy of the equipment, past performance, performance fitting. So I think it should be in the RFP that we're the ones that are applicable, obviously not G&H, as you said.
Yeah, G and H don't apply, but
But the ones that are applicable, we need to be in the RFP saying, we're gonna look at all these and address these.
Commissioner Grant.
Do you guys, I think there's 3 companies represented here. Do you guys collect customer satisfaction? Do you guys do customer satisfaction surveys?
I will give it to you tomorrow.
Mr. Suzy?
My customer satisfaction surveys come when I'm out in the community talking with the customers. Hey, the phone's answered properly, the waste is picked up, that's all I track.
So there's nothing that we could actually refer back to though?
Not on paper.
Okay. All right,
Madam Chair, I do believe that when we wrote up the last kind of request for how we're gonna do business, we looked at customer service because I believe they had to turn in their complaints once a year and now we're making it quarterly. So no matter what happened in the past, we're looking at making sure things aren't bad in the future by keeping track of customer service more often. So I think that's fixed, even though you can go back in history and whoever was working before may have had bad service. I think we've got a way to fix it in the future.
In fact, that was a significant amount of time and discussion on that particular issue, is that the former board that created the RFP that we're working under now did consider that. And so, and 15, 20 years ago, we weren't what we are today, right? We didn't have the same issues we have today, so.
yeah,
Commissioner Grant.
I'm good with that. Except it gives us a way to track it, doesn't give us a way to address it. To actually defeat the fire beast.
Actually, I do believe that we did spell something out.
I'm sorry, I missed the question.
I think there was something spelled out on how we deal with complaints about the franchisee, how the county addresses that with the franchisee.
Okay.
And the contract.
So-
8:15, my head's still swimming, so remembering everything is.
So talking about the rubric and the scoring here,
You like that word?
I do.
He does.
Because you gotta have some way to compare it, and this is how you can do it apples to apples. If you look at all the things that are in here, it does cover pretty much everything that's in the NRS, so.
What page is that on?
So we can change the weight, but if you look at, it's on page 29.
Each commissioner can score it however they want. Whatever's most important to you, make it most important to you. All right? Am I missing something on that rubric?
Well, we didn't score it, that's
We
the
have to
problem.
score it. Stack it.
And according to what we discovered is the board's not allowed to score it in an open public meeting. That's why every bid process we do, franchise, utilities projects, road department projects, there's a group of people that are selected to go through, use a rubric to come up with the scoring. That's all compiled in total, and then you guys make a decision based upon the department head's recommendation.
Jeff just made a wonderful suggestion. I won't say that often. There's a group of people selected. I think maybe we should reserve the right to select a group of people that evaluates them, even if it's not us. But
I
just
like
a
the
thought.
last crew that did it.
But you were talking about just getting rid of the weights completely on this form.
Yeah, going like the past,
Just,
no
just,
past,
just
yeah,
get rid of those.
yeah, get rid of the weights, the multipliers. So just saying it's, you know,
I don't know how the weights got assigned.
that we don't either.
Well, I can tell you, when we had the last public meeting just like this, the last workshop actually almost exactly a year ago. I took pretty detailed notes, listened to how the board prioritized things and put it in there.
But for a weighted factor, was that scientific enough to actually make sure the weight is in correlation, you know, an actual correlation to the factor? The answer is no. That's why I'm saying remove the weightings. I mean, you know, I would just say remove the weightings, and there's nothing in NRS that says they have to be weighted.
Correct.
So.
Have a gentleman from Dayton that wants to speak.
I know, I asked him to hang on a second. I was making sure these two were done. So, Mr. Wright,
I'm still Russ Wright and I still live in Dayton. This is a question for Mr. Rye. There's been a suggestion that one of the commissioners be on the committee that weighs this and does the evaluation. Can a commissioner legally go through the weigh process and the evaluation process and then later vote on that contract?
Probably not. I don't think we know the definite answer.
But and that's why Jeff had made a recommendation. Maybe we should reserve that right as a board to appoint the committee that goes forward and looks at it. Because it wasn't just, you know, commissioners. So, I mean, I was also, I mean, if you want to look at my notes, you know, I think maybe a member or two of the community should be looking at it also, because this is
well, you
going
better
to
be careful of
directly
the community because there's information that,
is, yeah, well, we found that
You
out.
can't give that out to the community.
right, and I do think it's a cleaner process if none of the commissioners are involved in this portion of it. So that we all look at it equally.
Then we would have to remove the recommendation at the end and just have go, no go on each item.
State law says we have to make a recommendation.
State
before
law
the-
says staff has to make a recommendation.
Well, it says somebody's got to make a recommendation before I can make it, before we can.
Do we have a committee already, like the planning commission?
They're a public body too.
Okay.
Yeah, it says a solicitation which contains a provision that requires negotiation or evaluation by a governing body or an evaluator may not be disclosed until the response is recommended for board.
So the reality.
So as long as everybody's boxes are checked and everybody meets the criteria, then the recommendation is all however many put in for it. The recommendation would be, they all meet the criteria, now pick one. It doesn't say you have to recommend one. It just says you have to recommend based on that criteria. So if they match the criteria that we've set forth and they've got everything we need in that RFP response, then they all should be recommended. If they can't be recommended, they should be eliminated.
It's either go, no go.
See, I can
That's the
play with
point-
words too.
That's the point of the checklist, but you still have, there's gonna be differences in price, right? They're not all gonna come in with the same price. There's
No,
gonna be
there's gonna be a
differences in
difference.
equipment, there's gonna be differences in experience. So you have to, that's where that.
And I think that's where when you give us 3 bids that are competitive, that meet the requirements that are set forth, you know, regardless of price, regardless of age of vehicles, regardless of, you know, any of those, that is our job at that point to weigh those and decide which one gets the bid.
I would certainly have to defer to the district attorney's department.
Mr. Rye?
Yes, Steve Wright, DA. I think that's right. I mean, what the board says, this is not a unique process. It's what you do on utility contracts, everything else. You get a recommendation. You evaluate the recommendation and make a decision. But you can't make a decision that's not in line with the RFP. not in line with the weighting, not in line with the scoring, not in line with the evaluation. It's not a unique process because it's a franchise. It's that same process that you guys do time and again with bids, or other RFPs, where you make that decision. It is the board's decision, but it's not the board's decision without consideration of what's included in the RFP.
Right, but I'm saying if all bids have, they all meet the criteria, every one of them. They don't have to recommend one over the other.
Which is
You
where
have
we
to
got,
you have to recommend under the statute, the lowest responsible. And so that there is a requirement that you have to follow. And so that's what you're guided by. You can't just say, I like this bidder the best, he meets the qualifications and award the bid to that person. You have to still meet the criteria for lowest responsible.
which one?
It was one of the. It was one of the 332s. Keep going.
So based on that, Steve, we should only get one recommendation from staff, and we should only see one. I mean, if they're the lowest and they've been deemed responsible and responsive, then we have to look at price and nothing else.
But it's a board decision, it's not a staff decision.
And that's what I'm saying, it's.
And you wait it, but you do that all the time. I mean, on the utility projects, we don't give you one to
I
choose.
agree with you.
And you get to evaluate whether or not that recommendation is in line, whether it's consistent with the RFP, whether it's in the best interest, and whether it's the lowest response.
And that's what I'm saying, so we should get go, no goes, hey, here are the ones that have met the requirements, you guys decide which one. Because we got beat up really bad last time because, well, you guys didn't select the lowest price. That's the only thing anybody was looking at. When we
Right,
got
and
beat up.
and I know in going years back, there has been times that we didn't pick necessarily the lowest bid because the most responsive bidder
Was not the lowest.
was not the lowest, so we have to weight all of those things, not just the price.
That's why you have the rubric that provides you that information.
I know, but we weighted the
price.
price the heaviest when there's other
And you can
considerations.
change that.
Right,
The staff still has to provide you the recommendation based upon, or whoever the panel is that is looking at this, provides the board with a recommendation based upon that information. Here's your most responsive bidder.
But the weighting caught us off guard last time, because we had no idea that there was to be weighted subjects. So that really
Yeah,
tilted the scales.
we had all the weight at one end and not on the other items.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
if I may, I just want to go on the record as saying lowest bid's gonna be my heaviest weighted item because of the time we're in right now and the price of everything else. So I just want that coming out of my mouth saying that will be the number one thing I'm looking for. Thank you.
So in which one? In waste pickup, in transfer station, in residential waste?
Residential trash cans, correct.
So,
That will be the heaviest weighted item on my list, so I'm gonna still weight it that way when I look at it. I don't know if that's right or wrong.
Mary Ann,
Mary Ann Seacheck and from Stagecoach. As a
That's
customer, as a customer, I want to know when the truck is coming, so that I can have the bin out by the street, or Andy does. And I expect them to empty the can and leave it there in reasonable condition and not broken up. But, and that's probably my priority as far as being a customer, getting my garbage taken care of. But I also care about recycling. Is that involved in any way? If I throw all my aluminum cans and all of my plastic bottles into the garbage can, is there some place along the road where that stuff is recycled? I don't have to worry about it, or if it matters to me, do I have to take care of it? Is it in the plan in any way?
Previously, when we went through the RFP, we actually left the recycling out because that will increase prices.
Obviously.
Yeah. Did I see a hand over here or was you just waving your pen? Okay, I just caught something out of the corner of my eye.
At an auction and I just got called on a bid, I didn't bid, sorry.
I bought stuff that way before.
Sorry, Madam Chair.
Not a problem. I'm just trying not to ignore you guys behind me over here.
Let us know if you win, Robin, if it's anything we'll back on.
Yeah.
So going back to the weights, do we want the weights? Do we not want the weights? And if we're gonna stick with the weights, what's the suggestion? Because right now I'm hearing that we don't want the heaviest weight on the rates only. So I'm ignoring you guys for a minute, trying to get my board to give some direction to Andrew, so. Can you brought it up?
No, I don't like the weighted factors at all. If we have no scientific way of actually determining them. I think that the prices are gonna be the prices and we take that into consideration and in context with everything else.
I agree with Commissioner Ray.
To get rid of the weights.
Can we get that on the record, please?
I actually agree with you a lot.
Well, I agree with that. I'm gonna look at everybody that is in the bid. I'm gonna figure out what I believe is most beneficial to the customers and constituents, and I'm gonna vote for that. Disposal company.
Well, that's kind of where I'm gonna look at that price, but I also want to make sure that they're meeting the service needs
True.
of the county.
And again, we looked at that as a go, no go. If they're not gonna respond to all the categories where they have to do service, then you're gonna say, this is out of here. They're not even gonna be, we're not even gonna look at it then. If they don't come up with everything they're supposed to come up with, we shouldn't even be looking at that piece of paper. They've gotta cover everything.
That'll be step one. I mean,
Exactly.
the rubric is to determine, who gets the recommendation. That's a way to. A fair way to evaluate everybody on the same scale. It doesn't necessarily have to be weighted. In my mind, that gives you a little bit more control over which factors are important to you and which ones aren't. That's why we did it that way previous. And again, it was based off of conversations. Nobody on the board told me, this needs to be weighted at 5, this needs to be weighted at 3. It was just, I took a look at a 150-point scale, figured out how that broke down, and that's
And
how.
we don't like your scale.
And that's fine, and that's why I bring it up now. I mean, that's.
Oh, come on, Andrew, it's 8:30 at night. I gotta give you a hard time.
And Madam Chair, if I might, I like Rob's suggestion. I would say his comments. He's gonna look at what's most important to him. You're not telling us what's most important to us. And because we may all be looking at the same thing, we may be looking at different things. And I think it gives us more latitude to address it.
So far I've got 4 no weights. No weights, you'll weight it yourself.
I think a lot of the world works on rubric and there's, I'm not gonna put the experience of the bidder as the same weight as the price. I hope there's young kids calling and I hope maybe it's a new franchise. I'm not gonna put the same weight on that as I do the price.
So what we're asking though is, do you want to determine your own weight as you're going through it, or do you
I'm
want?
fine with that as long as it meets the criteria.
Right.
There we go, no weights.
So if I understand so no weight on the rubric. So then the next issue is the board going to provide direction as to what the scoring parameter is? So in the current rubric, it's 1 to 10, 10 being the best, 1 being the worst.
I might have misspoke. I don't mind you using that because I would hope that if you're using a rubric and you weight some things, it's because of what that Lyon County is important to the people of Lyon County. The taxpayers, whatever. So if you're weighting it based on what you feel is important to our constituents, I'm fine with the weighted scale. I have no problem with it.
So the question I have is the board okay with a 1 to 10 scale? Or what, do they want 1 to 5 or 1 to 3? What does they want? Because that's gonna determine.
So if it's not weighted and we just do, yeah, that's a just point. If it's not weighted and we just do a 1 to 10 scale, at the end of the day, you add up all the points and you figure out who has the most
Right, the
points.
scales is gonna look, basically guide us in the fact that they met the criteria, who met all the criteria better than the other.
I like the
Well,
1 to 5.
I guess,
So,
my point is if you guys
because the
determine
problem
the
with
weights.
the way the weights were done, we put all the weight on one item and basically no weight on anything else.
Well, instead of eliminating the weights, you can distribute it differently. You can tell me exactly how you want it, and that way you get the recommendation that you look, you know, I mean, that meets the criteria that you're actually looking for. If I just do it 1 to 10 on each of these
still waiting.
items, there's no weighting,
You're still weighting it then.
You're still weighting it, but it's, yeah, I mean.
Each item can be weighted to the same score.
Each
though.
item is the same score, so you're still getting it's just my recommendation is not gonna be weighted on any of that. It'll be on the total score of the bid.
See, I'm actually happier with the total score, just doing a 1 to 5 total score than giving one item more weight than another.
Okay.
It's like that college class that 50% of your grade was the final.
Mhm.
You know, a lot of kids screwed off all semester and did the minimum, yet they passed that class because they rocked that final.
Okay.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay, so since we're changing that, going back to new vehicles, not new vehicles, do we really think that's gonna be a make or break at this point? Especially given the fact that we're hearing now, maybe even a year and a half to get new vehicles. Do we want to put a year limit, or do we just want to make sure that there's language in there that what vehicles they use meet a certain standard, no matter how old they are? Because you said, I heard back here, we have a 20-year-old truck that runs like a new one, so.
I think the standards set by the state, whether or not it's certified for use on the road.
Again, whether they get the job done,
Right,
you know,
so,
Madam
I don't
Chair,
think the garbage cares what it's hauled in.
that's right.
my
As long as
thought
it's hauled to somewhere other than
To get the job done.
place that doesn't want it anymore.
would be that the respondents to the RFP give us a detailed description of their fleet. Not just the fleet, just all the equipment that they're planning on using to satisfy the contract.
So as an example, using the rubric, the way the board has identified, you may have a bidder that comes in and says, I'm new to the game, so I'm gonna buy all new trucks and all new bins. Well, they're gonna be a whole lot higher in the equipment side of things than some of the other bidders who have been in the business for a while and have equipment that's 10, 15 years old. All right, so
if we could use the rubric and put our heaviest weight on newer equipment versus older equipment, could be an
well,
option.
there's no.
Maybe I misunderstood because
You just said there's no way.
I said if we was to go back to
Oh,
that,
okay.
if we was to do that.
But actually.
I'm just throwing out ideas.
But actually, so it's
It's
kind
a
of,
workshop.
it kind of is weighted because if I'm reviewing it and I'm looking down and Acme Trash Company that started in 2019 bids on the project, and they're gonna bring in 15 new residential trash trucks and 5 new commercial trucks with the forks on them. And I don't know what a pump truck is. But it's all gonna be new equipment. For me, they're getting a 5 versus somebody I got 25 18-year-old trucks that are hanging on by a thread, right? So I think again, it goes back to, we're trying to make it as objective as possible for the rater, but I do believe that provides them the ability to determine that, hey, this person is committing to new equipment, new bins, those kinds of things, versus this company over here.
So our
who's
1
got-
to 5 scale still works.
And it actually allows for comparative analysis in Rob's case where he can weigh the fleet of equipment being brought in versus the price, and is it justified or not justified in that, price.
And may I, Madam Chair?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Um,
I need a break. Go ahead.
That's a good idea. And it really doesn't matter. I think who is bidding and if they have equipment now, if they got to purchase equipment or what, they're gonna figure that into the bid anyway. They're gonna figure, because whatever vehicles they have, whatever equipment they have, it's gonna have O&M, and it's gonna have replacement cost. And if they don't figure that into their bids in the first place, they're not gonna be in business for the long haul. So
What if they have 5 new Yugos though, okay?
you can find
they
a
still
new
make
Yugo. I
those?
will buy- You can find a new Yugo, I will buy it.
Oh, I-
You guys say this jokingly, but I was looking at Yugo hot rods about a month ago on the internet. Just one of the 2 o'clock in the morning things. They still make them.
I'll do that, okay.
You're the
Buy
one that
one.
said that, I believe it.
Are we gonna take a
Okay.
break?
Yeah, can we take a 5-minute break or so? I need to at least stretch my legs.
Yeah, no, but that's what people take these old meetings.
Right.
Totally remodel them, put V8s in them, and drag them. It's like,
I
are
mean,
you
it's not
kidding me?
bad, but after a while, it's like, wow. Oh. Okay,
Madam Chair, you are
can
ready.
everybody calm down here? Andrew, are you ready?
Yes.
Okay, I know Commissioner Gray has a couple more and Commissioner Henderson does. And then we'll check with the other 2. So Commissioner Gray, what else did you have on your list on this RFP so we can get people home and in bed?
So I'll throw this in, there's
Namely
a
me.
little disagreement between Andrew and I, but maybe we could probably clarify this. I would like to add in there the language that I thought we'd adopted, and maybe I'm wrong, that we'd adopted or approved in Silver Springs with regards to a dump, and the operation of a dump. And I think, did we approve language, didn't we? Or-
We actually approved language to be put in there, but it got left out.
I don't think there was specific language though. It was more like we need to include this in and that was what I was getting at. We need to include.
Okay,
a
so maybe
provision.
research it and get back to us then and figure out.
Okay, yeah, approved.
Okay, I would like to, this was a big one, especially with the public. Would like to know where people are planning on putting transfer stations. It's, in the middle of a neighborhood, it's not good, but if you've got a piece of property or somewhere that fits the bill based on what the requirements are of the transfer station. But I think we need to know more about where a transfer station is gonna go.
Can I comment on that real quick?
Sure.
Won't that be dictated by zoning anyways?
So.
Well, yes, but we all want to make sure they're sending us the information that we can reach back out to them and say, sorry, but you can't put that transfer station, there, not zone.
Okay, so it needs to be included in the RFP where the intended transfer station will be.
Yeah, and it already was part of that proposal process. I don't think we got very specific answers, so we'll require
We
that a
need to
little
make
bit
it
more.
Well,
specific.
when you do
Okay.
standards for transfer stations, so.
Yeah,
That's-
we'll put that in there. Transfer stations, there's only a handful of zone, actually, there's really only 4 zoning districts that are allowed in, I believe. So, don't quote me on that, but without looking at the table, I'm pretty sure there's only 4. So, and they are, I believe they require a conditional use permit. So,
Well, I guess location would matter as far as serving the majority of the communities where they're going to be. So I guess that language wouldn't be bad to have.
yeah, we'll make sure that.
Commissioner Gray, your other one?
Here we go. So this kind of bit us in the butt also last time. I'd also like to know what each applicant's experiences with transition of service. A little more detail than, we can just transition. Have they done it before? What kind of scale? I think that's really important. So we don't have customers left out in the cold you know, we need a smooth transition. And then also the service, this actually got two more, service startup fees. Yeah, and I think it was in the last one, but I wanted to bring it up in a public meeting because so many people were screaming that, oh, we've got to pay new startup fees. Well, no, they're in the transition of service. If within the first 90 days, when you transition, there will be no startup fees. And if you delay it past 90 days, which there shouldn't be any reason in the world to, then you could be subject to transfer fees or service fees.
Startup fees.
Yeah. And then the last one, and this, I've heard this from more than one person. I think Mr. Keller brought it up again today. There needs to be with the rollers, the rollaways. There needs to be some flexibility with the contractor as to, you know, hey, I think I need a new can. Can you please bring me one? It doesn't have to be a brand new can, but a replacement can. So, and then I think everything, like I said, leave the other stuff with regards to cans and that we've had in the past. That's all I've got, Madam Chair. That's it.
Any questions on the ones that Commissioner Gray threw out?
Oh, no.
Okay, I'm gonna go to Commissioner Henderson real quick.
Yeah,
He had
that's
two.
fine.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And this, one thing I'm interested in services is why to get the senior rate, you have to get a smaller can. Yeah, because the senior rate is 64 gallons, instead of a 96 gallon can. There was differences in rates. Something you can look into this.
Yeah, the senior citizens definitely get a smaller can with a smaller rate.
Yeah, and you know, that doesn't necessarily work. I don't see why they can't get the bigger can, because it doesn't take the truck's gonna pick either can up. It's still one guy going by picking up one can. So I like that looked at. And then also on the, and this is going to the sample contract now.
Okay.
In particular, item 3.4, the terms of the agreement. Yeah, I like the way that we strengthened it to where it has to come back to the Board of County Commission. What I am seeing and what I've learned in this process is 1 year is not enough time. Okay, right now it says they have to notify us if they want to extend the contract within 1 year. That should be at least 18 months. And then that comes to the county commission, and the county commission can at that point then either agree to extend the contract or say, no, we're going out for an RFP. And that gives us the amount of time so that when the contract expires, and not to say, if we say we want to go out for an RFP, that doesn't mean the current franchisee can't apply. But I just want to make sure we have that time so we don't get it back into this situation again. We've got to extend contracts because we didn't allow for enough notice.
I like it, makes perfect sense.
And that, I'm done.
I'm good with that. Is everybody good with that?
Yep. I like the senior. That was something never even brought up before. I like that. They're getting a discounted rate, not a discounted service.
I've actually heard that from
Daryl
several.
Brown, DNS waste removal. A lot of times the seniors do not want the big can. They ask for a smaller can because they can't get it around. So it's always been a norm to have two different size cans. One for the seniors, because you are giving them a discount, the price of the can is less. You know, they still get the yard picked up on the side, you know, in the south Mission Valley, but as far as giving them a big can, that's always been something I always wondered too, is why not just give us a discount and give them the big can, but a lot of them, once they get the smaller can, they really enjoy the smaller can.
Well, it could be worded, you know, that you have to offer the big can, but if they have their request, they can have the smaller.
Yeah, it doesn't preclude them from having a
Right.
smaller can.
What if we just had different senior rates for the different size cans?
Well, there you go. That's why you're paid the big bucks.
Let's ask the senior on our panel. Jeff, what do you think of that?
I will tell you from my personal experience, my 85-year-old mother, she has a big can. And I don't know why, because she's got like 2 bags of garbage. She could go a month and a half and never fill the big can up. But if you took her big can away from her, she's probably gonna yell at you.
Because she's still got room to stuff you in there when you get out of hand.
That's right.
Well, I have a father that's exact same age as your mother. Oh, that's right. You and I are the same age too. That is
You're
the
older.
same way. Actually, I'm older, I know,
There we
a few
go.
months. Anyways, But he does the same thing. He won't take the senior rate because he don't want the little can. He wants the big can. And he's got one bag of trash a week. But if he decides he wants to fill up that can, he's got a big can to fill up. So anyways, I understand the argument. So Commissioner Jacobson, you,
You know, I brought, thank you, Madam Chair. I brought up just a small item earlier today and it wasn't at the appropriate time. Tonight is, so, and Mr. Hockaday reminded me of it.
oh, you brought your notes.
So, on special events, they're in there and they're part of the franchise agreement. Is that correct? As far as if they need rollaways,
You had all day to look that up because
But-
he tried to bring it up
but
twice.
you don't have to look it up. So whether it's in there or not. And Jeff, I think you alluded to, maybe we have like 2 special events throughout the year, 3, 4, how many?
Well, so we have a bunch of special events, but we don't have a large number of special events that require a whole lot more trash. So Night in the Country in Mason Valley, Daryl can tell you how much he puts out there. They're out there cleaning up on a regular basis. And then we have an outdoor festival permit application for, you guys will be hearing in September for an event at the Dayton Valley Event Center. That they may require roll-off containers, those kinds of things to make it happen. But we have a number of smaller special events on a regular basis. Don't require any more than a 96-gallon can or their 2 96-gallon cans. I just think about like in Yerington, the Theater for the Arts I'm involved with. We do a show once a month. We have 140 people show up. Our 96-gallon can and a red garbage can, 35 gallons each. We put it out in the street and Daryl's guys pick up on Wednesday morning. It doesn't require anything any different.
So I guess what I was thinking is, because if they are special events, usually it's for nonprofit or for a fundraiser for this or that. Would they fall under the franchise, or could they go with the lowest bidder on that and put a little more money in their pocket, so they won't be part of the franchise? They could go out, if they needed a rollaway, they could go with the lowest price. It was a recommendation that I read in one of the things. I'm like, you know what, that's probably a pretty good idea. It's a small amount, so it's not gonna make or break anyone that wins this, but it would be a way for that fundraiser to make a little more money. So I guess I would say, leave that off, let them find, if they need a rollaway, go with the lowest bidder, and they get to make a little more money for their whatever. Andrew, thank you.
In the previous RFP, roll-off dumpsters that are not a part of regularly scheduled service were excluded in both the residential and the commercial.
So they
So
can go with whatever they want.
So they can go with it.
Okay, then it's a moot point.
Well, the special events fall into that.
I would think that, yeah.
They're not part of the regular schedule.
Right.
That was just a correspondence I read, and I'm like, you know what, that's a good idea, so.
Commissioner Hockaday, anything to add?
No, I think most everything that we had in the previous and plus the thing we discussed now is covers what I need to make sure we have in the proposal.
Okay, Andrew, anything you want to add?
No.
I've given you one last chance.
Anything you want to add back?
Don't answer that. I still have a hammer.
I do need some clarification because I don't know if we ever
Okay,
landed on
that's fair.
the new equipment piece. I don't know, did we decide against that?
We decided against the new equipment piece and we went with this,
Identify the equipment you're bringing in.
the identification.
Yeah, that was already in there. Okay, and then, and you're sure you don't want to do weights on the rubric? Straight scores,
We went with the scores 1 through 5.
1 through 5, not 1 through.
And because of that agreement on this board, that's why we got rid of the new equipment.
Okay,
Because it'll get scored 1 to 5 based on what they propose.
all right. I don't think I have any further questions.
Okay, one last chance to the audience. Anything that you think we should have put in there for discussion?
Richard Thompson, Stagecoach, referring to page 6 of the old RFP. Under bulky items are refrigerators, washing machines, big appliances. They're limited to 75 pounds. Who has a refrigerator that weighs 75 pounds today? What does it cost me to get rid of one bulky item? I'm a senior, so I don't get the extra cubic yard. Could someone clarify that for me?
What does it cost you today, or what would it cost you under franchise?
I ask you to interpret the old language and the old price sheet. As a senior, I get a 64, and I would prefer to have a 96, even if it costs me more. Because I'm not so infirm that I can't fill a 96. But I don't know how it costs me to get rid of a refrigerator that clearly weighs 125, 150 pounds without calling another service. Could somebody clarify how that works under the old RFP?
You mean under the, I'm sorry, I need a little clarification under the one that was issued previously.
That's the only
Wasn't
thing I've got
awarded,
to
or
work
the
on.
one that was,
The current-
not the
current-
2009 one, is what I'm getting at.
No.
No, he's talking about this one.
Those refrigerators and
Andrew,
chips.
page 6.
Page 6,
Yeah,
under
yeah.
bulky waste, it has stove, refrigerators,
Water heating.
CNCs, washing machines, anyways, not to exceed 75 pounds.
None of those items come in under 75 pounds.
Yeah, but
Because a non-senior gets another cubic yard, and presumably that's in there, but as a senior, my appliances never go out, so I have no need to ever get rid of them. You see my problem?
Yeah.
Would you give that some thought, Mr. Hawkins?
Hassan.
Hawkins, okay, sorry.
So,
Would you give that some thought when you write
the way it was set up in here was a special collection service for large amounts of bulky, brush and bulky waste and or bundles are available, but it's for an extra fee. And so and this wasn't adopted under this RFP, so, but there is a line item in the current rate schedule. So basically, there's a trip charge and then a, on a service day, if it's on your service day, it's an extra $10.
But if I may.
You're talking about the weight requirement,
Yeah, because what you just pointed out to on, the collections,
so
it says for brush bulky waste. Well, that still falls under the definition of bulky waste, which is still limited to 75 pounds.
yeah, and so actually under the current contract, it's limited to 50 pounds, so.
Then how do we get rid of those items?
So we can increase it for sure. I would imagine that cost will go up, so.
I wonder if we could split it. Bulky waste, the fee for bulky waste up to 50 pounds and then over 50 pounds, or 75, over 75.
Yeah.
Yeah, you cut it in half and get rid of half of it in time.
That's just-
Yeah, you cut a refrigerator.
Well, on a
Okay,
on a
so,
refrigerator, you would have to first make sure it was evacuated, because we're not allowed to take refrigerator that has any Freon in it. So that would be something we have to consider.
cut the line before you call them.
Oh, you didn't say that.
Joking.
Nobody heard that. Okay.
Throw it in the trunk of Jeff's truck.
We are getting giddy, folks.
This is just,
Kevin,
definitely don't do that.
I've done this for years and I still do it to this day. This is called a special pickup. This is not called part of a bulky item or anything. All stoves, refrigerators, everything like that, if somebody wants to pick up at their house, it's considered a special pickup. So we have a charge for refrigerator. If I'm gonna pick it up and the line is intact and everything, I also have to charge what I'm gonna get charged to the dump for it to have it evacuated. So I'm gonna charge the person, usually costs about $75 to $100 to pick up the refrigerator. If they got 2 stove and washer, I'll pick it up for $100. I'll pick it up sometimes 3 for time, because I'm going the same place. But I have, that's usually how you do that, you do a special pickup. It's not included in your garbage price.
I actually
Correct.
wanted to point that out
Put
because a
bin
lot
there,
of our,
and you throw it into the bin and then we come and get the bin.
So, but that's the concern I think the public has. So you do it this way, who's ever doing the central line county, are they doing the same thing?
That, I don't know.
And see, that's the challenge we're having, is making sure that it's consistently across the board throughout unincorporated Lyon County, it's consistently the same.
But that's,
Now, what you do with the city of Fernley, or the franchisee does the city of Fernley, we have no control over,
That's right.
but
yeah, but I mean, that's the way you are able to do that. All the other stuff and items can be considered bulky and you take that extra if you can. We have different services than what you guys have in the center of the county. We do our stuff a little different. I wish everybody could do it the same way, but.
We don't have special pickup defined in here.
yeah, I was just gonna say,
Okay.
we need to get, I think we need to further define this. Because we've got trucks that, I mean, I know the truck that comes through my neighborhood, they're not gonna pick up anything bulky.
So we'll just
They
say,
have their little arm, they have a little hole that, for the cans. And you try to get them to pick up anything that's bigger than that can going up, and they're not touching it.
okay,
So these are special pickups
Yes.
when
So
you
we-
start talking appliances.
so we can certainly do put in there provisions for a charge for a special pickup. And I would probably define that as anything over the 75 pounds that's in the bulky section, right? Which would include white goods probably, and which are appliances. The refrigerator thing, I think that the Freon thing is an issue for sure.
Yeah, you may want to just pull refrigerators out of bulky waste and put those in special.
Yeah, no, I
Because it's
mean,
not
we
just a
would.
matter of the pounds,
I'll-
it's the bulkiness of it, because some of these trash trucks are not designed
So,
to throw a refrigerator into.
and I do want to throw out that, as Kendra has pointed out, that some of these items might be open market too. So they're not
Right.
limited
Exactly.
to the franchise, they're not subject to the franchise.
Right,
So
but we
anybody
got it
can-
in the RFP, the way this is worded, I think that needs to get broke out and better defined,
Okay,
so it could be
I'll-
read
I'll-
accordingly.
put some, I'll put those.
Recycle sets of waste. In the RFP, it talked about services provided. So if I went to Sears and bought a fridge, they could come out, install the fridge and remove the old one.
That's usually
So that
fairly
was
cheap.
outside of the franchise already.
Yeah, well, that's great for somebody that goes and buys a new one, like, when I bought my last new one from Lowe's, they offered to pick up the old one. So, but you get somebody that the refrigerator goes out and they just go buy another used refrigerator. Then they're stuck with an old one they gotta get rid of, so somewhere we need to have that identified.
I'll come up with the provision to put in there and bring it back before the board in the draft.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Mr. Wright,
Andrew, you probably need to include other than refrigerators. I just had an air conditioner replaced and the air exchange unit has Freon or something in it had Freon that they had to evacuate also.
And I'll have to go look at NRS on that because there's specific NRS
Yeah.
related to the Freon, so I'm not sure if it can, I'm sure it can be picked up, I guess, before it's drained, but there's, I don't know. There's probably a separate charge for that, and I know there is in the current rate sheet, so I'll come up with something.
okay. Commissioner,
I just want to throw something else out there for the board to consider, maybe put in there. So we get lots of heavy winds out here. And really, so based on when I hear the trash man coming, I try and get my trash out there. And here recently, this season of winds, I've missed it a couple times and tried to get somebody to come back and pick it up. I'd rather game it and not have my trash strewn all over the neighborhood and put it out that morning or the night before. So I'm just wondering if even for an additional fee, maybe have a special pickup where somebody can come back, because I mean, there's always trash trucks somewhere within the neighborhood, you know, I'd gladly pay an extra $10 to have, you know, hey, I missed it, can you come get it? Because I didn't want it to, you know, be sure all the neighborhood, because I gotta tell you, if I leave it out there, yeah, I love my trash man, but he's not gonna be picking it up if it's over sideways and there's garbage everywhere. He'll set the can upright and empty what's left in it, but he's not gonna pick up the other garbage. So I would just, you know, I'd rather pay an extra 10, 15, $20 to have a special, you know, a special stop. And right now it's not offered.
What about my bear that keeps eating my garbage and throwing it around?
Invite him over for dinner.
Put it in your freezer.
Okay, back to the audience. Anybody else come up with anything that we might have forgot?
Toilet says TILLIO.
You only had to spell it once. We're good.
He likes spelling it.
All right, on the bulky pickup, you have in the contract 75 pounds maximum per item. We run single operator, single driver trucks. 75 pounds is a lot of weight for that driver. Can we go down to 50 pounds?
And I think that was the rationale that was in why the other contract was. The current contract is set up that way. So maybe anything over 50 pounds would be that special pickup, and then.
That's a good solution.
And then, you know, we have a cap of, I don't know, what would be the cap of, I don't know, I have to think about a reasonable cap on that.
And I'm looking at worker safety here. That's the way I see it.
Well, and that's why I was saying we need to break that whole thing out, because I mean, even some of the trucks, they can't pick up that bulky stuff anyway. So, I mean, if they can pick it up and put it in the can and dump it, they'll do that.
Yes.
But they're not gonna get out and manhandle
75
something too
pounds.
big. So
Yeah.
by separating this out, you know, and dropping that to 50, I don't think would be an issue, as long as you're putting a provision in there for special pickups for those heavy items. And then they're sending somebody out and charging accordingly that can lift it.
Okay.
Or they have a dolly, or they have whatever they need equipment wise to pick it up.
Yeah, I was already kind of
Agree?
thinking that down that road, so.
Okay. Anybody else? You had your turn.
No, I did too. Richard Thompson, Stagecoach. We all know how to call and complain about oil on the street, or green nuts and bolts, or a dented trash can. But how does the average person say, hey, I'm pretty satisfied with the service that I'm getting right now, the provider that I'm getting? How do I make a positive input that can be weighed off against all the negatives?
Send an email to.
Save a couple points.
Jeff Page at lion-county.org.
Jeff Page.
J Page, J Page.
J Page.
Or Kendra Costa, yeah.
And so, and to be honest with you, so I mean, I get a number of, in the last 12 years, a number of complaints about the franchisee, whether it be in Central Lyon or South County. And those get forwarded on to deal with. And we've also received some positive comments. We had a hydraulic spill here in Central Lyon County, I don't know, 6-8 months ago. It was unfortunate for the driver. He didn't realize it early on, so we kind of drug it down the street a ways. We had a small minor hazmat, and the 3 residents that were affected by it called me the next day and were very appreciative of, it was I think a Friday night, actually. They were very appreciative of waste management supervisor getting the issue addressed. He or she had some questions as to what they could do or not, and they were in contact with Kendra, and they were just appreciative. And so we passed that information along back to them. So in government, you always get complaints. It's very seldom you get positive. So when we get the positives, we tell everybody.
But you are the point man for the positive.
Actually, Andrew it's community development's responsibility.
That has been at Lyon.
So here's a good one. You could send a positive tomorrow. Jeff Page is excellent at passing the buck to Andrew Hansen. Excellent.
That's called delegation of duties. That's what we hired him for.
Okay, anybody else, anything that we just got tired and didn't think of tonight?
Madam Chair, I don't need to add to the franchise. I do want to, for the public and the board edification, just so everybody understands, So the processes have been outlined by statute. Those didn't happen overnight. Those are a direct result of government years ago being good old boy and awarding franchises to brothers or cousins or buddies. And that's why we are where we are today. So we are, as we always are, living with regulation that is caused because of the sins of the past.
And I gotta take issue with that. Some of those regulations were passed in the middle of the night in some legislative session.
But there's no doubt about it.
Okay, well, if there's nothing else, I want to say thank you to everybody that has stuck with us until 9:23 at night. But I think we had some good discussions. Andrew's got a lot of work to do. So is one last run, anything else?
Well, I want to thank all of the trash companies that were here, their representatives, whomever. Your input was very valuable to me. And I appreciated the emails that we received on some of this stuff and your recommendations. Your expertise is appreciated, and so thank you for that.
Mr. Hockett, anything?
It was actually a very enjoyable meeting. I think we learned a lot. I hope that everybody's satisfied with being able to speak their piece and get an input for the betterment of Lyon County.
Anybody else on this side?
I just want to thank everybody for being here.
Madam Chair,
I got,
the clerk has notified me, we still on the agenda, still have one last public participation.
I thought I was getting ready, I thought you were gonna,
No,
I'm like,
I just-
no, we're not done yet. Okay, so now I'm gonna go out to the public, not to discuss waste management or, sorry, it's habit, waste franchise. So anything else you have a public comment on, this is your time to make those comments.
We got a smart audience.
Good, okay.
Like 3 people on.
It's now 9:24 and we are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Oh.
How are you? Good, how are you?